Hello and welcome to the final episode of Music Mates, the podcast where I always pick two albums from each year in the 90s, except most of the episodes of the podcast, and we talk about them. Today we're at the very end. We only have two albums yet left to review, and I'm happy to say that they're two of the best albums I've listened to. Last episode I lied. I said we were going to be reviewing Led Zeppelin and Kasabian, and that was my plan for the longest time. However, even though Kasabian by Kasabian is probably my favourite album of all time, I've chosen to drop it and do something not miles different, but still very different enough. The reason for this is because I'm going through a bit of a phase at the moment, at least I was when I wrote this. We still did Led Zeppelin, but instead of Kasabian, we're doing an album called Because the Internet by rap and hip-hop artist Donald Glover under his stage name Childish Gambino. I'll go into a bit more detail about him when it comes to us actually reviewing the album, because I think we're going to start off with Zeppelin. But the main idea I was going for is that Led Zeppelin was the beginning of harder rock and roll. I guess the Beatles or someone like the Kinks is probably closer to the source of maybe modern music, if you want to call it that. Before rock, it was jazz and blues music, and then it morphed into electric guitars under the label of rock. But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to show the progression of music that's occurred over the last 50 years. Led Zeppelin's third album is 50 years old, and Because the Internet is only about 7 or 8. And I wanted to get you guys to talk about it because even though on this podcast we primarily looked at rock from the 90s, I think there's been a huge, overwhelming genre and stylistic change that's happened just in the last 10 years. But in 43, I think the change is much more noticeable. Donald Glover's music and Led Zeppelin's is extremely different, and it's almost entirely due to the fact that they're from different eras of music. Things have changed in the world. I wanted to offer a huge contrast in this final episode. You guys excited to review these albums? Yeah?
I am. I am.
Yeah.
Nice. So,
I can't believe you missed the chance to do a self-titled rock album from the 90s, though, Ethan, because I absolutely just would have given it a 10 because that's the trend.
yeah, I'm trying to think of what other albums I could have done from around then. But you do like self-titled albums, don't you? Garbage, Rage Against the
Yes,
Machine. They are great. They are
those
really,
are my
really
two
great.
examples. Yeah, I mean, it's just simple, it's like, we're here, this is our name, and the album is efficient.
Yeah.
Best things to
I mean,
remember.
Led Zeppelin did that like 4 times, basically.
Led Zeppelin 1, Led Zeppelin 2, Led Zeppelin 3, Led Zeppelin 4, and then they dropped it and decided to go, I think, for Houses of the Holy was their fifth album. So yeah, their first four albums were just the name of the band, but with a different number in front of it. So maybe these guys are for you, Tony. I
Interesting.
guess we'll find out.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, without further ado, let's talk about Led Zeppelin. The album I've picked isn't a studio recorded album, but instead a compilation album of their best hits, Mothership, because I found it too hard to pick a favourite album of theirs. We're only doing the first disc, 13, in my opinion, incredibly good songs from their first four albums. I don't know if I have to introduce them any more than I already have. It's Led Zeppelin. They're rock legends, pioneers of their genre. Jimmy Page alongside with maybe Jimi Hendrix as the greatest guitarist in rock history. But first, I think I'll talk a bit about the history of the band. So, they were influenced by earlier post-war blues, psychedelic sounds, and screaming guitar lines. The band's history starts in the 60s. Jimmy Page, who was a session musician with the Yardbirds, a group that had the likes of Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton, other very technically advanced musicians. Page was a big part of the band's final album, Little Games, an album that saw contributions from John Paul Jones, a bassist that ran in similar musical circles to Page. The Yardbirds soon came to its end after the group's dissolution. Page and Jones, however, decided to collaborate more on future projects. This happened fairly quickly. After Keith Relf and James McCarthy left the Yardbirds, Page set out to find replacements on vocals and drums. It was suggested to Page that Robert Plant be hired as he was singing with another band called Hopstweedle. After hearing him, Page asked Plant to join the band in 1968. Jones joined on bass. Plant recommended John Bonham as a drummer as they played before together. So the lineup of Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham called themselves the new Yardbirds. They played a live performance from a previous engagement as the Yardbirds in Scandinavia in September. The following month, the quartet recorded their debut album in under 30 hours, and an old member of the band informed Page that he owned the rights to the new Yardbirds, so the band decided to call themselves Led Zeppelin. They signed with Atlantic Records in the US before the end of the year, and in early 1969, Led Zeppelin set out on an American tour to support their soon-to-be official released first album, titled simply Led Zeppelin. Throughout the year, the group relentlessly toured in the States and UK soon after recording their second album, Led Zeppelin II. This album, along with the first, was an instant success, topping the American charts. The second album in particular helped Led Zeppelin become a sensation, the new rock band on the scene. Refusing to release singles off their albums, even though they were receiving massive radio play, Zeppelin kicked off a trend known as album rock. The band, famous for its innovation, was starting to become a serious contender for the 70s that the Beatles were for the 60s, with its mysterious and abstract album art, little relation to the press and public, and obviously the music itself. Led Zeppelin 3 was released in 1970. This was the album that helped the band be seen as more experimentational, delving into less conventional genre styles, mixing folk with heavy rock. It was released to less commercial success than the first two albums, but the price to pay for a more different sound. Their next album, actually untitled, but commonly referred to as Led Zeppelin 4, met Led Zeppelin 2 and Zeppelin 3 around halfway with the more blues-oriented sound of the second album with the folky sound of the third album. The song people know the most famous from Led Zeppelin 4 is obviously Stairway to Heaven, which is maybe quite possibly the greatest rock song of all time. It was an insane hit at just over 8 minutes and ended up being the most played song on the radio in the history of album based music. Led Zeppelin 4 was the group's biggest album ever, selling over 37 million copies over the next 4 decades. After touring this album, the band went back into the studio to record in 1972 Houses of the Holy, not Led Zeppelin 5. The album incorporated touches of reggae this time, with the usual riff-heavy songs that were a staple of Led Zeppelin's. The band had another smash hit album on their hands, and it's cut and sorry, I've written something here that I just can't read right now. It led to a tour that began breaking box office records. Sorry. Most of which had been previously held by the Beatles. In July 1973, they performed a three-night stand at New York's Madison Square Gardens. This was known as the Song Remains the Same tour, which accompanied a film. The next year, they created their own record label called Swan Song, which they then used for all of their following albums. In 1975, Led Zeppelin released Physical Graffiti, their sixth album, a double album in fact, another big success, topping charts in the UK and US. They planned a tour to follow this up, but unfortunately the day before the American part of the tour was intended to start, Robert Plant and his wife suffered a serious car accident in Greece, and Plant had to spend the rest of the year recovering. While recovering, the band released Presence in 1976. Sales were less successful than their previous albums, due maybe to the fact that they didn't tour with the album. In 1977, the band toured in the US. However, nearly 3 months into a very successful tour, Plant's 6-year-old son tragically died of a stomach infection. The band instantly cancelled the tour, and the future of the band was on hold for a while. It did begin to appear over the next couple of years that the band might in fact be over, although they did carry on, eventually, and in 1979 their much delayed eighth album, In Through the Outdoor, was released. In 1980, without realizing the band began their final European tour. While rehearsing in Jimmy Page's house in preparation for the American tour, the run of awful luck the band had culminated in September of that year, just before the start of their American tour, when John Bonham was found dead in his bed following an all-day drinking binge. He had died from passing out and choking on his own vomit. In December 1980, Led Zeppelin announced that they were disbanding because they couldn't continue without their drummer and close friend. Following the split, the remaining members began solo careers. This would carry on for a long time, and in 1988, the band's members came back together to play Atlantic Records' 25th anniversary concert. Replacing John Bonham on drums would be his son, Jason. In 1989, Page remastered the band's entire work for the 1990 box set. At the time, the 4-disc set became the biggest-selling multi-disc box set of all time. Another full reunion occurred in 2007 when the group played a historic concert in the O2 Arena. This was called the Celebration Day concert and was commercially released in 2012. They haven't really done anything since, apart from releasing more remasters and things like that. So, guys, let's talk a little bit about Led Zeppelin. I've done quite a bit of talking right now, and I, of course, will have tons of things to say about Mothership, but I would really like to hear what you three think of the album.
This is a bad sign, because podcasting is the closest thing I have to like a career. But I don't have much to say about Led Zeppelin other than because in part because their sound is so defining of what rock is. I listen to it and I'm just like, okay, I'm hearing Like it almost loops around, and I'm just hearing sort of rock music. That's what I'm thinking when I'm listening to it. And I do enjoy it. There's quite a few like standouts like later on in the album. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. You know, Immigrant Song, that's good in Shrek 2.
Three.
Um,
Shrek the Third. Come on,
Fuck!
Tony. Come
Fuck!
on.
I hate myself. All
The
right. Well,
fake Shrek fan.
all right. Well, it's also in, of course, Thor 2, The Dark World.
Yeah, I guess it's always in the third in not exactly trilogy.
In films about powerful guys. Coincidence? I think not. Anyway, the album, it's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, sort of analyzing a best of album basically, because it's sort of like I don't know. Yeah, these it's interesting because it kind of mixes two sort of things where. For a lot of these albums so far we've done, I'm sort of like, yeah, but there's obviously like weaker songs that are filling it out, kind of. It's the sort of thing of like when you are a band creating music, like, and the nature of like any human with preferences, like there's always a select number that kind of work and feel like they don't work, and then this is just like across a whole bunch of presumably pretty good albums. Like the best there. So there's like not really that filler as much.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. I actually kind of regret it a little bit because the reason I picked Mothership was not just because it has like all of their best songs from their first. I say first four albums. I always forget that there's a second disc because I just think of the first disc. But there is definitely an extra 13 songs on the album that we're not really bothering with. But anyway, but the reason was because I was choosing between Zeppelin 2 and Zeppelin 4 because they're my two favorites. I love them both, but I love them both so equally. I was like, oh, I want some songs from Zeppelin 2, but I also want some songs from Zeppelin 4, and I just can't choose one over the other. So that's why I ended up going with Mothership in the end because I got to have the best songs from each that I really wanted to do.
Yeah,
So you're right, there isn't really that filler, is there?
yeah, and it also means kind of as an overall thing, like talking about the first half of this album. It's talking more just about Led Zeppelin as a whole instead of one whole like creation or an album. So it's interesting because it both feels like it's addressing some of our problems with previous things, where it's like, oh, there's some weaker songs you just don't need. But it's kind of I don't know, lost some feeling as an album. It sort of feels weird just judging a best of album. Like I don't know, hard to explain.
It's kind of cheating.
Okay, this is like a music people purist thing I never got. Hating on best. I'm personally a fan of best of because it's the best, you know. It cuts
Oh no,
the
yeah,
filler.
no, I
It's just the best
It's
song.
all killer, no
you know,
filler.
Exactly.
yeah. I experienced David Bowie as a best of sort of thing because that's just what we all my family had downloaded on our iPod. So it was kind of later that I got like listened to some of his distinct albums and kind of it was very interesting with David Bowie, of course, because he like changes what he is over time and kind of between albums. So it was sort of interesting because I went from him kind of being this whole one amorphous thing and then realizing he was this kind of change over time, sort of with experiencing that. But I think partly because like that's how I first got to know him. Like, yeah, no, but best of albums, if you're just wanting to experience the music of a band, it is the best way to go. If you're sitting down and are trying to like review an album, it's slightly weirder.
Yeah, because when I recommend a band to someone and I'm like and they ask me, okay, all right, what album by this band should I listen to? I don't. I should just say listen to the best stuff because it has their best songs, but I also hesitate to do that because if I want to recommend Nirvana to someone, I would say listen to Nevermind, even though I don't know technically their best of hits is probably a better album, but that's because Nevermind was a very culturally significant album. So maybe I wouldn't quite have that same feeling if I was recommending a band that doesn't really have that kind of, I don't know, their roots in history in the same way that someone, I don't know, like Nirvana or Led Zeppelin would. But I would recommend a full idea, because the band got together and they said, okay, these are the songs we're working on at the moment. They represent how we feel about things. We're going to put them together as 12 or 13 songs and release it as an album. So I think, funnily enough, that weirdly enough, even though it's more specific to a period of their lives, it ends up representing them better than a compilation album of their best hits. I don't know if you agree with that at all.
Mothership's an interesting example
Yeah.
though, because like in this podcast we've talked about album sequencing, artwork, the album kind of telling a cohesive story and stuff. But Led Zeppelin's first four
Mm.
albums aren't titled Mothership and Disc One. So already this isn't really an album. This is half of an album. It's presenting the best songs from those first four albums that you could say they might have more of an identity, but they are literally just titled Led Zeppelin. Um, and it's presenting them pretty much in sequential order. Like the first one is Good Times Bad Times, which I think you said is the first song on their first album, and it ends with
Yeah,
Stairway to Heaven, which is arguably their best song. So like I feel like it is just the hits in order, and you're not losing. Like I have listened to Zeppelin before, and I did like a few of the songs that didn't make it onto this, but you're not losing that much. I feel like just from hit to hit to hit is so great. And personally, actually talking about the music, it's fantastic. It carries such a momentum because it's fantastic song to fantastic song. And I don't know if this was a deliberate choice or just natural, but I feel like it's not just all of like the fast bangers like back to back. You slow down, you kind of have like a variety of songs. And moving from the first album to the fourth in that kind of sequential order really works because I don't know. I guess they get more confident. The songs definitely get longer as they go on. So starting with something like Good Times, Bad Times, and then ending with Stairway to Heaven, I just feel like it is like a really great album.
but I would add to that further and say that if you're if you're coming from that angle, then an even better example that shows that disparity between the start and the end of, I don't know, a four album sequence is something like Communication Breakdown to Stairway to Heaven, because Communication Breakdown, there is something raw there. I mean, it's I'll talk about the song, sure, at some point, but it's a fast paced riff. It's 2 minutes long. It kind of starts and then it ends before you even really have a chance to I don't know, get in it, I guess. Whereas something like Stairway to Heaven, you're right. It's like they kind of become more confident as these albums have progressed. There's something more there that allows them to take bolder leaps, to not just do something that's maybe a bit safer. They actually have the confidence to release a 7 or 8 minute song, and then that 7 or 8 minute song actually ends up being one of the most popular songs ever made.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of hard to imagine someone sitting down and having to create it because like it's such an iconic song, really. Like I don't know, it's just weird to think, oh, I'm finally confident enough to do this. It's like, oh, it's Stairway to Heaven. Like it's one of the the best songs. It's hard to imagine it being like a something someone had to create. It just kind of felt like, oh yeah, here I found it. Here it is.
It's like a timeless artifact that like you think it's been around forever,
Yeah.
but it's like, oh no, it came out, then.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen a. I think there's a. I mean, like, there's obviously tons of covers of "Stairway to Heaven." But I think there's Dave Grohl doing a version, and he like pretends to forget the lyrics.
What do you
I think
mean he
that's something I've
pretends to
seen.
forget the lyrics? What is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, he's not singing the right lyrics. He sort of kind of mumbles some of it. It could be that he has legitimately forgotten the lyrics, but it's kind of hard to imagine. I don't know.
That sounds really funny.
That he
I'll have to
doesn't
check that
he
out.
doesn't know them. Yeah, I think it's Dave Grohl
No,
doing
it would make sense, and I know because we've talked about supergroups before in this band, because a really great example is Audio Slave, which is 3/4 Rage Against the Machine, 1/4 Soundgarden. There's another really good supergroup which is one third Queens of the Stone Age, one third Foo Fighters, I guess slash Nirvana if you count that, and then a third Led Zeppelin where it's John Paul Jones, Josh Homme, and Dave Grohl, and that's I mean what a lineup that is. Those three coming together, so it kind of makes sense that Dave Grohl would perform some cover of Stairway. He might have even done it with John Paul Jones there as well, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that them Crooked Vultures? Is that
Yes. Yes. Did I
the
say them
supergroup?
Crooked
Yeah.
Vultures, or did I forget
No,
to mention it?
well, I don't think you said that was the
Okay.
name.
Yeah. No, I was talking about them Crooked Vultures. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So Harry, you've listened to the album quite a lot of times then at this point, right? Because I remember I talked about doing Mothership ages ago because we've been doing Music Mates for so long now, and I think I had Mothership decided as being one of the final albums we were going to do, and I gave you the CD for it, and you listened to it quite a lot back in the day.
Yeah, I actually own my own copy of it. I think I did buy a copy of it because I liked it that much.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, it's really good. Hot take. It's a good. At one point, I was like, Ethan, you can't just do one disc of Mothership. But eventually, you convinced me because it is good. Doing one disc of an album is allowed. Um,
Yeah, I could have done both discs, but I thought, well, I mean, it'd be better if you guys had the time to listen to the first disc twice than listening to the whole album once, because you'd know the songs a little
I
bit
also have
better.
my director's cut of when you finish Stairway to Heaven. You load up Kashmir and then you stop.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're actually doing disc one and Kashmir from disc two. I did forget we were reviewing Kashmir as
But
well.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's really strong. Like I say, good time, bad time. It's a great start. I'm not the biggest Dazed and Confused fan, but apart from that, like the first kind of like six or seven are like really solid. And then you get eventually to like things like Immigrant Song and Rock and Roll, which just have such like a momentum and like an upbeat kind of energy, and are pretty much instantly like iconic. It's obviously hard to divorce Immigrant Song from the iconic uses in pop culture like Shrek 3. Um, but I think it is just like an incredible song. Um, and yeah, same with kind of rock and roll. Um, yeah, and then as we say, we get to the end with Stairway to Heaven, which is like rightfully regarded as a really like fantastic song. When the Levee Breaks, which I wasn't the biggest fan of at first because it just takes so long to get going, but I've come to like it a lot more on subsequent kind of listens as well. But yeah, honestly, I don't think there's a bad song in here. My one kind of criticism would be, I think Ramble On and Heartbreaker kind of back to back. They're probably my least favorite songs in the album, along with Dazed and Confused. So kind of having them in that sequence, I wouldn't say I lose interest, but they're not as kind of thrilling as Immigrant Song, which follows Heartbreaker. Um, yeah, and then everything from then on is pretty fantastic. Yeah, it's a good album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I so for me this is like one of the first albums to come across when we're only looking at the first CD, so it's not really. But yeah, it's one where it feels backloaded in that I'm like, yeah, the ending songs are the best ones with like weaker opening. It's like the reverse to most things. But then again,
Maybe Zeppelin 3 just sucked. Or Zeppelin 1. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, to be honest. I think Ramble On is really great. I actually do like it a lot. I think Jonathan might even be listening to it now, because when he
it's because it's
talked
been
it,
mentioned.
yeah, yeah.
It's partly to remember exactly how it goes, to be honest.
Yeah.
They just say Ramble On a lot.
Yeah, I think that I thought that was all it was.
But Dazed and Confused is an interesting one because it's one of those cases where I'm not too keen on it, and I wasn't too keen on it for the longest time. But I think recently, in maybe the past, I don't know, half a year or so, it's kind of won me over a little bit, and I think it's just because of the atmosphere the song has, and it's originally what pushed me away from it quite a lot. So it's a cover of a song originally by an American singer-songwriter called Jake Holmes, and it was written in 1967, and Page had actually covered this when he was with the Yardbirds, and then did another rendition of that when Led Zeppelin was formed, and they actually got sued by this guy for copyright infringement, but it was dismissed with prejudice. And it's actually not the first time Led Zeppelin has been sued by other artists for copywriting material, which we'll get on at some point. But Dazed and Confused as a song itself, like I said, I warmed up to it, and what I didn't like was, I don't know if you guys know the song well enough, but to me it feels very disconnected. It doesn't really have enough of a through line that kind of brings all the parts together. It's choppy in that way, and I'm also not the biggest fan of the main riffs and their tones. They sound a little bit too they sound too alien, especially that main kind of very like it's got a very sort of murky, swampy atmosphere that you get. That's the best way I can describe it. That you get from the bass line and how it works with that lead guitar. It's a very, very thick sound. And to talk about the lead guitar itself, it has such a demonic scream to it. It's so high pitched and monstrous. And it's actually what originally pushed me away from the song now appeals to me more about Days Confused. I don't listen to it often, but I don't think Tony mentioned how it's generic rock, and that's a fair point. But I think if you listen to the album more and you know the songs a little bit better, Dazed and Confused is anything but an average rock song. To me, I think it's actually got a really original sound. The way that all the instruments work together, it has this very, very distressing feeling that you get from me listening to it, and it's what's kind of brought me over to it, and what makes it more memorable to me. And also, Dazed and Confused is actually a song that some live performances of it go on as long as 30 minutes. Really, really long. They have these insanely long improvised drum or guitar solos that just go on. I think actually the version of this song they performed on their Song Remains the Day tour, I've watched. I mean, I obviously wasn't there, but I've seen it on YouTube. And it is just 30 minutes of most of it pretty much just they kind of I'm sure that there's some rehearsal going on there, but it feels like they've just improvised it on the fly, most of it. It's really, really cool.
Interesting. The main thing I feel with Dazed and Confused is that the breakdown section that they have in Whole Lot of Love would fit better in Dazed and Confused.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
At least if you're wearing headphones, the kind of stereo like swiveling effect that is going on. I'm there feeling like, yeah, this is making me dazed and confused, and then I look and I'm like, but I'm in the middle of Whole Lot of Love. Why? That's kind of my main note on Dazed and Confused. I think it is interesting that kind of screeching tone it gets with the guitar and that slow sort of ploddy feel it gets.
Ploddy,
but
yeah,
I think
ploddy's a great way of describing it. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
But it sort of means, I don't know, unless you're fully dedicating time to it, it just as much as a 6.5 minute song can slip by, it sort of just kind of goes by without really having a moment to go, hey, look at me, look at what I'm doing. I'd say, especially once it kind of gets into the murkier part of it.
Yeah.
Whereas that moment in Whole Lot of Love where it starts kind of spinning around, like that grabs you, brings you back, and is like, obviously it's further on in the album, but like, yeah, I don't know. I think that's. I feel part of what Dazed and Confused is missing is that sort of moment where it hits out and says, yeah, I'm here, listen to me. And a good example of what they could have included is the breakdown section in A Whole Lot of Love.
Yeah. I actually, now that you mention that, I think the breakdown section of Whole Lot of Love, which actually does go on for maybe half the song, before that fantastic solo comes back in, is that actually there's a very sort of trippy and psychedelic feel to it, isn't there? That Dazed and Confused kind of manages. It's a little bit wishy-washy. It's a little bit hazy. That the Dazed and Confused definitely has. I think ploddy is such a good way of describing the tone and the texture of the song, because it is something. It is so thick. The sound. It feels like the riff's being held back by something. It's every step that it takes is so heavy and has so much weight to it that it's slow paced in that way that really feels like the riff, the notes, that the melody that's being played has a big emphasis on it. But yeah, that solo, not solo, the breakdown from Whole Lot of Love should have been in Dazed and Confused. Now that you mention it,
I have a lot of things to say about Whole Lot of Love, if I'm allowed.
yeah, I was going to ask Jonathan
Yeah.
what he thinks of the song that's in between them, "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," but we can come back to that, and of course,
Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You is a really good song, so I would like to get back to that. The Whole Lot of Love is Living with Ethan. You hear it a lot. Because it's got a very iconic riff that Ethan just walks around the house singing.
yeah. So when Harry says that, he doesn't mean I play it like coming out of my laptop a lot. I mean, I literally just hum the riff, the main riff, because it's how the song starts. The da 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 dun da dun da dun da 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 da.
Yeah, it's good. It is good, but you just do it so much. I wanted to say that first of all, and the second story is, I don't know if you remember this, guys. We were all here, but we recorded the Attack of the Clones podcast at mine.
Oh my god. This is
and
ancient
then-
Oh
history.
my god, this memory. Yeah, you told me about.
Well, I was
this.
listening to this. I was listening to this song on the drive home, and it was like nearing the end of the dip. So I turned my car off, and I thought it was gonna be really funny when I turn my car on. It's gonna suddenly hit you with the oh da 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 da, you know, that big explosion. And we were like arguing because I had to kick you out of my house because Attack of the Clones podcast had gone on for so long. And then we got in my car, and I turn it on, and it just comes out really loud. I think it scared the life out of Tony. But that's my memory of
Sounds
this
true.
song. Just how that it kind of dips, and then I always kind of laugh to myself when it kicks in again.
Yeah.
because I just remember that.
It was great because we were having this conversation about something that I wanted to carry on in the car, and then when we started talking about it, it was almost like, oh, Ethan, can you just shut up? And the best way to shut me up was to just turn on the radio and have the song play, and I would just stop speaking mid-sentence and just start singing along with the actual song that was playing. Yeah.
I feel A Whole Lot of Love was probably the first Led Zeppelin song I heard, I feel. I don't know, it's difficult to know these sort of things, but I think that would have been one of the first songs, I think.
Do you think it's a good song, Johnny?
Yeah, no, it's a good song. I'm sort of surprised it's as long as it is. I think it's because I mostly sort of know, I mean, The Whole Lot of Love and the intro sort of section, and less as it gets sort of further into it.
Yeah, it is actually amazing, Jonathan, that you say that, because when you say, yeah, it's a long song, but you almost don't think it is, and it's because that breakdown section is so long, and Led Zeppelin has almost built a career out of making songs that kind of replay one riff over and over again, and it's very repetitive, but it somehow keeps you hooked the entire way through, because Whole Lot of Love might be a 5-6 minute song, but the only guitar riff that gets played is that guitar riff, pretty much. It's what the song opens with. And to be able to sustain that for that length of time, and to be able to walk away and just say, well, I think Whole Lot of Love's an incredible song. It's one of my favourites that this band has ever done. But to be able to walk away and still listen to it over and over again, even though it's just 5 minutes of hearing that same it brings you back each time. It's quite yeah, and it's a very popular song, and it's also the first song from their second album, I'm pretty sure. So it kind of helps. It's what people listen to first when they hear the second effort by this band. So it kind of makes sense that it has that reputation.
When the like main sort of beat, like through line is good enough, you know, you don't really, like, I guess, need to sort of distract it with like throwing in random shit, you know. It's definitely like the opposite of most of like the sort of music I normally listen to that for non-review purposes, which is like, I don't know, like electronic style stuff where they'll just put in like random fucking sounds for no reason, just at random points in the song, just because they're bored. It's like, oh fuck, nothing's happened. Let's put some piano in for 2 seconds. So it's getting you like, look, we're just gonna nail this one. It's like Halo Combat Evolved. We're gonna nail this 30-second loop, and that's all we need, you know. Which is it's like a very like pure, you know, way of songwriting, which is neat, which is
No,
neat.
definitely. I mean, there have been so many songs, so many songs that have just been constructed out of one repeating riff. I mean, and it's not even just confined to rock music. I mean, there's even a term for it in jazz and funk music especially, where it's like a 7 or 8 minute song, and it's pretty much just, well, the main rhythm will be one recurring riff over and over again. They don't even change it up. But then it's the idea that all these other instruments could come in and build upon that and kind of riff off of it. So it's been done to death, really. Just the main riff that carries on throughout the entire song that the song's built on. I mean, I know When the Levee Breaks is another great example of a song that just has one riff, pretty much, or two riffs, and it's 8 minutes
Mm.
long, but I still love it. I still love it so much.
Hmm.
Which we'll talk about. Are there any songs from this album, Tony, that off the top of your head that you think stand out and aren't
I
just
was gonna
another
say,
rock song?
when you mentioned When the Levee Breaks, as much as I do love, you know, the upbeat rock bangers, Immigrant Song, you know, Stairway to Heaven, um, I think like the more slower ones, like the ones that have more almost weight to them, are like, you know, When the Levee Breaks. I think there's another one that I forgot the name of, but it's like those slower ones. They have like more impact and almost like more character to them. To me personally, than the more like upbeat, like, you know, hard hitting rock songs, you know, that are like faster paced. I just kind of like that a bit more.
Mm. I think there are songs on the album that are probably a bit more slowed down than When the Levee Breaks. I know Since I've Been Loving You is definitely one. I think Harry
I
likes
think
it
that might
from
be
what I've
it.
talked to him. Yeah.
Yeah, it has some really good vibes, that song. I think another thing they do really well, and Tony said "Stairway to Heaven" is an example of an upbeat song, but it kind of tricks you because the first 5 minutes of it are really slow and kind of acoustic. And I guess it's the same with a song like "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," where it's just a really long setup for an incredible payoff of just kind of like slowly building into until at the end it's a rock song. But it starts as this kind of more like slowed down ballad, which is the other thing that Led Zeppelin do really well. Like, I guess in picking the hits, some of the more kind of longer, like ballady songs didn't really make it in. But I do like that they have these two kind of modes of like a great riff and a really entertaining fast rock song, or this kind of they slow it down. You have the kind of builds and explosions in songs like Stairway to Heaven and Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. I think is probably the most effective one, where the end of the song is just so good. Uh, it honestly makes it one of my favorite songs in the album.
Yeah, no, I think Babe I'm Gonna Leave You is really good. And it is that moment where it kind of just explodes towards the end, but then it's also when it dials back down to that acoustic riff, and that's how the song kind of sort of peters out on. That I think really works it out when they bring it back full circle and they don't just have it explode and that just be it. They dial it back down and it comes back to how it initially started, which I really like. But yeah, no, completely. I mean, if it just shows how versatile this band is, the range that they have, that they can go for. I mean, in the scope of rock, maybe there isn't the most insane amount of variation, but within it, there is. I think Led Zeppelin is a good example of a band that can do, I guess, both of the extremes, quiet and loud. They can do hard and soft. They can do fast and slow, and they do all of those really well. And Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. I mean, it's an acoustic it's an acoustic guitar song with moments where it becomes much harder. But it's a really beautiful piece of music, and I think again another great thing about Baby I'm Gonna Leave You is there are some actual errors in the riff. Like there's some moments where he plays false notes, or there'll be a bit of fret buzz. Um, but they'll keep it in because I think it gives the song more character. And I like that a lot. It's not just about perfecting a riff. It's not just about playing something until you get every single part of it absolutely right. There is that opportunity to make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes end up giving a song more personality. And I think "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You" does have that. There's definitely moments where where Page will speed up just a little bit, or he'll play the wrong note in the scale for the part of the song that he's playing, but it still works. It still works really really well. It doesn't pull you out of it at all, I don't think. Yeah,
That's talent, you know, when you fuck up somehow and it's still good. Yeah, I see why you picked this, Ethan, and I agree with what you were saying about how like almost like the thesis of Music Mates is like about how music has changed, even though we only focus on '90s music for the most part. Um, and I see that in Led Zeppelin. Like I see like the sort of like rock sound that's in, you know, the classic like it's just like Immigrant Song, and I do like it, but at the same time like I can see how like it's sort of been taken, you know, where people have like taken that and, you know, jumped off and gone like, okay, what if it was actually a metal rap and it was Rage Against the Machine, you know? I don't know if that's the
definitely.
direct linear evolution. I don't know if you could trace the genealogy of music like in a straight line like that. But I think I don't know, with rock music, I think I like the parts where they do something that's a bit out of unorthodox, like, you know, when they fucking bring in the cowbells, you know, when they start hitting shit with a golf club, or just like the more like technical like reverb and like effect music that
Mm,
like
mm.
Garbage did, whatever they did with their fucking fancy tools. But so yeah, so there is like there's this sense of like it's just, you know, the basics done really well in this, and I think I would like it a lot more if I had spent more time with it, which is a shame. Like I feel like I haven't given it as much time as I would like. If I listened to it through twice while playing League of Legends, which makes everything in your life worse. So so I think so. I don't know if I don't know, enjoyed it as much as I otherwise would, but it's still good. It's still good. You know, I had a good time with it.
Well, that is good. That is good. I mean, there are still a few songs that I would like to talk about, but I would just say that it has been nice to do albums that you three like, because I mean, in 2021, rock music just isn't popular like it used to be. So there would have always been the possibility that I would have basically picked like 20 albums that you three just wouldn't have liked at all. So it is nice to hear that generally you've all been really positive about the music that I've chosen and reacted to it quite well. I think obviously there have been cases where you guys haven't been as keen. I know Jonathan and Bjork just don't mix well together at all. Um,
Oh, a rivalry that goes back eons.
but yeah, no, it's been it has been really nice to pick albums that we can talk about in mostly a positive way, I guess. Yeah, so I think the last three songs I really wanted to talk about. I will just say I do think "Ramblin'" is really good. I again, it's another example of a song that I think is more gentle, um, and it's got a very kind of harmonious sound. It's very natural. I mean, when I listen to it, I picture something that you'd hear in a forest. I get a lot of kind of woodland imagery listening to it, and I also quite like the Tolkien imagery. I don't know if you guys picked up on it about Mordor and Gollum, which is something that they do in some of their other songs. I think they're all big fans of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, they were like 70s nerds, though, weren't they? It was like
Yeah.
where like Zeppelin and like Tolkien. It's an interesting kind of like cultural thing.
Mm.
Ramble On is a very one note song though. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It kind of just I don't know. They say Ramble On a lot.
They
They
do
do say
ramble on.
Yeah, they do ramble on by saying ramble on quite a lot. That is true. Yeah, yeah, I think Led Zeppelin are actually big fans of fantasy. I mean, they have to be because Immigrant Song has, you know, Norse mythological references, doesn't it? I think I read somewhere that they wrote the song actually having just come back from performance in Iceland, and I think they were inspired by the scenery to write something that was almost like a kind of an homage, I guess, to Norse mythology. So they are a bit nerdier in that way, which I don't.
That's why it fits so neatly into Shrek 3.
It all comes around.
Well, I'm pretty sure in Shrek 3 they just picked it because it sounds cool, whereas in Thor Ragnarok it actually kind of no, not even kind of, it just makes sense for it to be there because it's about Norse gods. Those films, so it's not just a great song, but it actually fits in well lyrically as well. Yeah. Another song that I wanted to talk about. So the last three songs that I actually properly want to talk about is Black Dog, When the Levee Breaks, and Stairway to Heaven properly. I know we've already talked a bit about Stairway, but I have a couple of things I want to say about it. Black Dog is maybe my favorite song by the band. I love it so much, and I'm going to break down to you why. It's mainly for the solo. I can't even tell you how many times I have been walking somewhere, listened to the song, and then when I get to the end, as it's fading out, I just pretty much rewind it back and start the outro solo again, over and over again. It's to me, it's such an epic and incredible way to end a song with the kind of energy that Black Dog has. I mean, it's just roaring the entire way through, and to end the song with a solo of the caliber that Jimmy Page plays is just it just works. It just works. And another thing that I think is so great about Black Dog is it's an amazing example of how synchronized the band is when they play together. Because the way the Black Dog is structured, at least the verses anyway, is there's a call and response effect between the band and Plant on vocals. And I read somewhere that it was inspired by a Fleetwood Mac song from the late '60s called "Oh Well," I think. But that call and response effect is it's for me is the heart of the song. It's when the band plays together and when they're completely together is just, I mean, they complement each other so well. The fact that the guitar riff and the bass riff is the same riff, so there's that direct harmony between the two is amazing. And again, when it all goes quiet and Robert Plant comes back in with that kind of ear-piercing vocal style before the band yet comes in again to play that riff it just works so well for me. And it's the fact that they all come in on a regular beat. I don't know how they did it in the studio. I tried to look online, but it's the way that Plant will stop singing and then the band will all come in at the same time. There's no drumming beat. There isn't any kind of like slow tat 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 so that they all come in at the same time. It's just they all do it. Plant stops singing, and then suddenly the band just knows when to come back in on that riff. And I don't know how they do it. It's to me, when they play it live, they have that level of chemistry with one another. That they don't need that drum beat going. They just all are in sync with each other, and it's just great. It's just a great. I think what it does best, Black Dog, is demonstrate just how good the band is. Technically, they're all amazing at their instruments. They're so organized, and they are so they're just really in sync. They're really really in sync. They're clearly four musicians who get along really really well with one another, and they know each other so well. I think. What do you guys think of Black Dog? I don't know. I don't know. I know John. I know Harry's take on it because I've talked to him about Black Dog. But Tony and Jonathan, do you have any thoughts on it at all?
It's one of those songs that didn't really register with me that much. I'll be honest.
Really, I thought. You know what? I actually thought Black Dog would have been one of the songs that you would have known by the band before listening to the album because it's popular enough. It's a really really famous Led Zeppelin song. I thought you would have probably heard it.
Yeah, I mean, sort of going into this, the songs I'd say I would have known would have been "Whole Lot of Love," "Immigrant Song," "Stairway to Heaven," and then also kind of ramble on. And I know "When the Levee Breaks" just because like Harry would bring it up. Those are the kind of songs I probably knew coming into this. So yeah, no, I don't think I've particularly come across it before. But yeah, I mean, yeah, hearing what you're saying about that call and response and how yeah, how impressive it is that they do manage to stay in time with that. Um, but I think ultimately to me, it doesn't quite do anything that grabs me so much going through it. It just feels like, I mean, an average Led Zeppelin song, which is, obviously a pretty good song.
Oh, I can hear the crazy thing is I heard you say that, and I can hear you're listening to the solo at the same time, and I'm thinking, this guy, what is going on right now?
I
Oh,
mean, this is just what Led Zeppelin music sounds like, though. It's just a bunch of guitars doing stuff, some drums going for it. Like yeah.
Music has been summed up. It's been understood. It's just instruments making sounds at the end of the day.
Music has been mated.
Credits roll.
That's it. We've done it.
Star Wars theme starts playing.
And then it turns out this is actually an End of Evangelion reference. We've had the credits roll, but it's actually just the middle of the the whole experience.
We do have to do Gambino.
Imagine if we were stealing the End of Evangelion podcast somehow. This is just a tangent we're on.
What does Andrew think about Led Zeppelin?
He likes them, yeah. I've never really spoken to him.
I'm pretty sure that he's a Zeppelin
Specifically
3
about it.
fan, right? I associate Led Zeppelin 3 with the Knowles family, Jonathan, and there's a reason for that. I just don't know what it is. It's either you like that album, your brother likes that album. I talked to your dad once, maybe he'd like that album when I was around there. I don't know, but I know that there is someone in your family that likes Led Zeppelin 3, the album. I'm sure of it.
I'll go on a hunt to see if I can find them.
Can we talk about When the Levee Breaks?
Can we talk about rock and roll first?
Oh, rock and roll.
Um,
Shit, yeah,
yeah.
rock and roll, definitely.
So Black Dog is a good song. It's not my favorite. Like, I agree with John Oates. It doesn't really stand out to me. Although I'm pretty happy that the only note I made about it is call and response. So I'm glad that Ethan also said that. Shows that I know something sometimes. Yeah, rock and roll is my favorite song on the album. Like I say, I am a fan of the ones like Immigrant Song. They just start with this incredible momentum and keep it up. And I think rock and roll is great like that. Like, for a song that's called rock and roll, you better be a good rock and roll song. You know, you're you're staking a claim by calling your song that, and I think it really does live up to its name.
Yeah,
I like
it's
how it
calling
kind of-
back to I feel more like 50s, 60s rock.
Yeah,
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 I
definitely.
was
Yeah.
just about to say that, Johnny.
Definitely.
I wanted the credit. You know.
We've become synchronized. Oh no, too much.
Yeah, no.
It's because the way the riffs are put together, it has that very bluesy feel to it. But obviously, the guitars
yeah.
are very overdriven because they're using distortion pedals and stuff.
Yeah, but I think that's sort of what it's harking back to as well. With it being called rock and roll, is like that was the sort of titles you had for the songs back then. I mean, like Rock Around the Clock, like very on the nose. This is rock and roll, and this is what it is. Sort of calling it that, but it sort of has that kind of early rock sort of notes, but kind of mixed in with the newer stuff that Led Zeppelin was bringing in sort of having a vocalist that sounds like he's standing in another room shouting at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
You've nicked my analysis there, Johnny.
I'm sorry.
You guys know the best thing about rock and roll is that drum pattern that kicks off the song. That's what hooks you in. I think the way that it starts, it's such a because when you hear that, you know that you're not only going to get a banger, but you know that you're going to get something that is going to keep up that pace through its entire 3-minute runtime. If they have the courage to start it off with that drum beat, you know it's there to stay, which I really really like. Yeah, rock and roll's great. I don't have much more to say about it. I think you guys have kind of hit the nail on the head. It definitely has that kind of earlier. I mean, even earlier than Led Zeppelin rock sound, where it's so blues inspired in the way that it's structured. But it's
I think it has the kind of blues chord progression, which I would remember better if GCSE music was more fresh in my head.
God, I was also going to say the classic music mates Ethan line of like, all your amazing ideas, good comments. I was also going to say that's why I haven't said anything yet so far.
Uh,
But yeah, I
yeah.
quite like rock and roll. Yeah, as you said, it has that sense of forward momentum in it. That's
Mm.
pretty good. I think there's this weird like idea that rock and roll is like dad music. It's been around forever, and for some reason that's got to equate with it like being bad. Like there's almost that like idea in the back of my head like is it actually good? It's like when I think of like old films, I'm like they're shit. They didn't invent good films until Iron Man. But
Oh wow.
What a statement.
but like it holds up, it's not boring just because it's old. That prejudice that I have invented for no reason is not true. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I think you get a different feeling when you're the younger brother, and like this is what the cooler brother you look up to, who's like 5 years older than you, is sort of like listening to. Like it for me, that was never a moment of thinking this would be uncool. It was like this was always the cool stuff. Um,
Yeah, I mean
yeah. Anyway,
yeah, it's definitely. I think rock and roll is probably one of the songs I heard quite a bit growing up, especially like Red Hot Chili Peppers. I think that's one where it's like
Mm.
ingrained into my brain. But yeah, it's good. It's good. I was gonna say like if this is older brother music, uh, uh, younger brother music is sort of like Limp Bizkit. That's the through line I've drawn. That's my statement.
Maybe at a time. I definitely think of if there's anyone in a family that would listen to Led Zeppelin, I think it is more dad music. Whereas I think older
Yeah.
brother music would probably be like more recent emo-y stuff. Like if I had an older
Oh,
brother,
like
they would probably like My Chemical Romance and bands like
Pierce the
that.
Veil. Oh
Pierce the
man,
Veil, yeah.
older brothers aren't they horrible, Jono? And Ethan and not
Oh wait, no.
Harry.
Wait, no. I am the older
right.
brother.
Yeah, that's why I called you two out.
That's the joke. um,
Alright.
it's funny you saying, Tony, about rock and roll being an old song, because it's a 70s song that's riffing on like the 50s
Mm.
and being like, this is the modern update to like this style of music. So like for it itself to now be the less like riffing on it and more like the thing that's been riffed on, I think is such an interesting evolution.
It's like how you take like a core sample of like the ice in like the North Pole. It's like there's the layers. It's like, oh, I see. Back then, CO2 emissions were much lower. The world wasn't gonna end. Um,
Are we going to talk about when the levee breaks?
We gotta wait. Like we gotta do like 2 minutes of filler before the talk starts.
Oh
Though.
God! Right. I have this. I have speaking of memories. I have this memory of we were doing a one of those light novels one time, and for my music choices, I basically just picked Led Zeppelin songs. And when the levee breaks came on, I remember Harry, you got up and said, "Oh, I'm gonna go to the toilet. I bet by the time I come back, the levee will not have broken or something like that." But the idea was the lyrics would not have kicked in at that point. And you went to the toilet, and sure enough, you came back, and the lyrics hadn't started. It was still in the intro, and I just remember that being really funny because it is a long song, and it does actually take time for the quote unquote levee to break. But for me, I think Blank Dog's my personal favorite. I do love it, but to me, technically, and even more so than Stairway to Heaven, I think this is maybe the best song on the album. I really love it, and honestly, there are so many good things about it for me. So I'll go through a couple of them. First off, I will just say that this song is a cover of a country blues song from the late 20s. I think 1929. By Kansas Joe McCoy and Memphis Minnie, and it was about the Great Mississippi floods of of I think at that point maybe 2 or 3 years prior. But for the Zeppelin version, first off, the way the drums kick off the song. I mean, we just talked um about rock and roll and the way that the drums kind of. I mean, it's a great introduction to the song. When the levee breaks, I'm convinced has the best drums in any song I've ever heard. It's like thunder. It immediately pulls you in, and it's also a drumming beat that's been sampled, I think, on numerous occasions. I big examples is Rhythm and Stealin', from the Beastie Boys debut album. There's a Dr. Dre song called "Lyrical Gangbang" off of The Chronic, which had samples it as well, and "Army of Me" actually by Bjork, which we did on the podcast. Another great thing about the drums on When the Levee Breaks is actually how that kind of tone was achieved, which was famously by having a pair of microphones at one end of a staircase with the drum kit at the other. So it kind of has that very, very slightly delayed sound that really gives the songs more of an oomph, more of an echo, that go throughout all 8 minutes of it. And another really cool thing about When the Levee Breaks is how it kind of at times feels like it changes tempo ever so slightly. It kind of has this very compressed feel to it towards the end, and actually, I think some of the layers in the song were recorded at different tempos and then slowed down when they actually, edited it all together. And there's also this really awesome panning effect that happens towards the end too, where the kind of where the instruments and the sounds move around in the outputs in a very kind of wishy-washy way. It's good. But another thing about the song that's great is actually the harmonica and lead guitar sound. It's fantastic. When we talked about OK Computer, I think on a couple of the songs on the album, like Airbag and Climbing Up the Walls, I think were the main ones. You can really get lost in them. They're 4 minute songs, and When Levee Breaks is a full 8 minutes, but the sounds as they work together are really all encompassing for me. And I think I used this sort of. I think I said a similar thing when we did OK Computer. I said they're borderline overwhelming. And when the levee breaks is one of the few songs that when I put the volume on max, if I'm listening it to in my earphones, I feel totally immersed in the song. Um, and I think it's a mixture of quite a few things. First off, I think it's that really hypnotic drum groove that I've talked about, and the harmonica sound, which is near ear piercing. And it's also the length of the song too. I think I could definitely see people listening to When the Levee Breaks and just being totally bored by it, finding it repetitive, and the fact that it takes about a minute and a half for Robert Plant to actually start singing. But that's part of the appeal for me. The lack of the vocals, there's really long parts of When the Levee Breaks without singing, so you really get relaxed in the music. For me, I think it's a brilliant song. What do you guys have to say about it?
Yeah, I think I enjoy that it takes its time to get going. Though I do think as a whole the song does go on for too long. But just the build up basically into the levee breaking or the vocals coming in is, I don't know, it's very good. I mean, for the reasons you have managed to put to words and I can't really.
Yeah, it's probably one of the few ones that did kind of stand out to me. I remember liking it. It's pretty good.
Do you find it repetitive though? Do you think it's a song that doesn't warrant being 8 minutes long, or do you think you're happy to sit there and listen to all 8 minutes of a song that pretty much a bit like A Whole Lot of Love, which is a 5-6 minute song? It is slightly shorter, kind of plays off of one recurring riff or some variations, sure, and I guess there is a chorusy part. But apart from that, it's that same kind of all the way throughout the song. Does it never get tiring for any of you?
I think it carries it. I think definitely the next album we're gonna do has some parts where it tries to pull off that. There's like a 3 second kind of loop that is all that the song really is. and
Mm.
it doesn't, like, it isn't strong enough for you to be like, oh yeah, I'm vibing. But this, there's enough of like a chill sort of like vibe to that building section that I'm just happy to wait it out.
It's a feeling I have for most of the Led Zeppelin songs is that they are much longer than they need to be. So when the levee breaks is not particularly different in in that regards.
So for you, it's more the fact that you're kind of surrounded by these songs that are all of such a long length that you kind of get used to it. So it's like, well, this is 8 minutes long. Okay, sure, I'm used to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, this is, yeah, compared to the other sort of Led Zeppelin songs, I mean, it is obviously longer, but sort of fits in that. But yeah, it's a note I'd have for the band in general. But then, I mean, that's because that's not the sort of thing I'm into. It's like walking up to a prog rock band and going like, yeah, you could be shorter. It's like, well, that's not what they're going for.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I think Communication Breakdown might even be I don't know if it's the shortest song by the band. It's definitely the shortest song on Mothership. And it is actually for Communication Breakdown. It is odd to listen to a Led Zeppelin song that kind of starts and then you could almost miss it. The song is over that quickly. When you compare it to plenty of other songs by the band, and 8 minutes is long. It's very very long, but it's not even the longest. There's a song from Physical Graffiti called "In My Time of Dying," which I once joked the theme from Trigun kind of like rips off one of the riffs from my memory of the first episode of that show. Uh, but that song is I think about 10 or 11 minutes long. It's really really long, and it has again I guess in the style of Stairway to Heaven. Maybe the way it pulls off isn't quite as technically impressive in the way that Stairway to Heaven does just build and build and build. But it does have that kind of Bohemian Rhapsody energy to it, where it's like what we want to do is almost create not an opera, but I want to create a song that people can look at and go, wow, how did they accomplish that? That's a long song with sections that are quite distinct from one another, but they transition really well, and it's a bit like Paranoid Android, Radiohead's song as well. I just mentioned OK Computer. So there is for me definitely an appeal behind very long songs just generally, because sometimes it can go either direction. Sometimes I listen to them and I just think I want this to be over as soon as possible. But sometimes you really strike something great, and I'm just happy to spend as long as I can just listening to this sound. I think when Levy Breaks really pulls that off for me.
So actually, technically, Immigrant Song is the shortest.
Oh, is it really? Fuck, that's
Yeah,
annoying.
2 minutes 27. Then Communication Breakdown is 2 minute 29, so it's only 2 seconds. But then Good Time, Bad Times is only about 20 seconds slower than that. So they do have, well, 3 songs in this that are under 3 minutes.
Yeah, but 3 songs out of 12 or 13. I mean, you think about how many
yeah,
of the
no.
songs are, well over 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. I mean, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, that's about 5. Dazed and Confused, that's about 6. Since I've Been Loving You is 7 minutes, I'm pretty sure. So they really like longer songs.
Yeah, no, the average length of song on the first half of Mothership is 5 minutes and 6 seconds.
Yeah, that tells you all you need to know. That tells you all you need to know.
Yeah.
Should we talk about Stairway to Heaven for a little bit, I guess? The final song on the album. Which we have talked about a little bit, but I've not really given my opinion on it properly. So Stairway to Heaven is obviously Led Zeppelin's most famous, most most critically acclaimed song by them. I mean, it might even be, and this isn't an exaggeration, it might actually be the most critically acclaimed song in rock history. Along with, I just mentioned Bohemian Rhapsody's up there, something like Smells Like Teen Spirit, or a song by the Beatles or the Rolling Stones maybe. It's one song that I think even people who didn't grow up in the 70s, they will probably recognize to some extent.
It's
and
right up there with 14 by Wheatus.
Not even Teenage Dirtbag, which is actually the song that everyone knows by that band. Oh, Tony, you didn't
Well,
even name
you
the
can't be
famous Wheatus
obvious.
song. um, yeah, I mean, and some of the records that Stairway to Heaven has just really kind of show that. I read somewhere that on the 20th anniversary of the song's release, it was estimated to have had. I have written down here 2,874,000 plays on US radio. Um, it's also the biggest selling single piece of sheet music history, sells about 15,000 copies annually, and the song itself often ranks extremely highly on users' best songs. But what do I think about Stairway to Heaven? Uh, I think it's all right. It's a good song that I don't really listen to very much. I only listen to Stairway to Heaven when I'm listening to Mothership all the way through. But compared to so many of the songs on disc one, I listen to them by themselves so much more than Stairway to Heaven. And it's not just on Mothership. It's in the context of listening to Led Zeppelin 4 as well, which is where the song is from. I think the last three or four songs on disc one are from Led Zeppelin 4. So Black Dog, Rock and Roll When the Levee Breaks, and Stairway to Heaven, which is it's an incredibly good lineup of I say singles. They're not really singles because they weren't released as singles, but I will call them singles for the sake of it. Um, and I think Stairway to Heaven for me, it's such a dumb thing to say, but I think a lot of what I think of it not being the best song is that it's just immensely popular. And you guys know what I'm like. I don't like popular things, even though I obviously do quite a lot of the time. Um, but I think the song's a little bit overrated. I obviously quite clearly see why it has the status it has. But I think in my case, it's like a lot of things where if someone knows one thing by a particular artist, whether it be a filmmaker, an actor, a musical artist, anything, if there's just the one thing that people tend to know, but I'm a big fan of that artist's work, I'm like, oh, I wish this song wasn't as well known, so that people knew a little bit more the other work that they've done. And to me, disc one is just completely not even disc one. Disc two is not as good as disc one, and that's why I didn't choose to do it. But disc one is just full of songs that I would give 9, 10 out of 10s to. And Stairway to Heaven, to me, I just don't think. I don't think it's all that. I think Led Zeppelin actually has better songs, and the fact that they're nowhere near as well known makes me sad a little bit. But in terms of the positives, I mean, structurally, it's extremely impressive how it changes. We've talked about how it builds. It slowly gains more and more energy until it kind of all lets hell loose in those last couple of minutes. And Bohemian Rhapsody is definitely a great comparison piece to Stairway to Heaven. And again, Stairway to Heaven, it has that opening riff, which is a beautiful way to kick off the song. It's a really slow, finger-picked part that paints this very, very delicate tune. And I think Stairway almost peaks early in that respect. My favorite part of the song is maybe the first 3 minutes of it, where it is more acoustically based. And yeah, and being 7 minutes, it's adventurous, and I do respect the effort. But I think when you look at longer songs by Led Zeppelin, I think Kashmir and When the Levee Breaks are both far better. And before I get your takes on these songs, you three, I wanted to tell you a couple of other interesting facts about Stairway to Heaven. So it's another song that's faced copyright infringement actually by a band called Spirit and their song Taurus. It's a well known example of copyright infringement in the music industry. And I think if you guys have a spare moment to it, a spare moment, go on YouTube and just type in Spirit Taurus and listen to the song. And it's about maybe 40 or 50 seconds into it. It sounds remarkably like the opening riff to Stairway, and the song is older. And another really
Ooh,
insane,
interesting.
yeah, it is interesting. And there's another really insane thing about Stairway to Heaven, and this might even be the best thing about the song for me. I read that in 1982, it was claimed that the song contains satanic messages through a technique called backmasking, which is when you play certain parts of the song in reverse. And again, if you have a spare moment, go on Wikipedia and scroll down to that section and listen to the small MP3 file that they give that takes a some of the lyrics in the song and then reverses them, and then supposedly I think Robert Plant says, well, what I have written here is, "Here's to my sweet Satan, the one whose little path would make me sad, whose power is Satan. He'll give 666. There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer, sad Satan." And it's really funny to listen to because I can't tell
Interesting.
how accurate it is. But it's just a really funny a really funny fact. And of course, when the band was asked about it, they said it was just complete bullshit.
With Led Zeppelin, um, one of them, I can't remember which one it was, but apparently one of them was like into the occult and like satanic stuff. So like they're perhaps not as far off as with some other things to label Led Zeppelin sort of Satanist.
I guess that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to actually, that is true. I'm trying to remember which of their band members was. You guys talk about what you think about Stairway to Heaven, and why you think it's a great song. Because I know some of you do.
Yeah. I'd say it is the best song in this album and that Led Zeppelin have probably done. And yeah, that sort of gentle guitar riff that sort of opens it, that just really does feel like almost like delicately climbing these stairs. The kind of sad vocals, sort of, yeah, just sort of coming through, just evokes such an emotion, and it all sort of slowly builds up. And then you get hit by the drums, like finally coming in, like I don't know, 3 minutes in or whatever, and it's you've injected some sort of pace into it that like kind of keeps you going on. Now that in a way that doesn't really happen in like When the Levee Breaks or one of their other sort of longer songs. So yeah, injecting this new life into it, sort of things, sort of the feeling of the song kind of changes a bit, and then again that is still like steadily growing until like a final kind of moment, basically. It just feels like an evolving songs with like interesting ideas, and yeah, sort of has an emotion to it that it can sometimes be lacking in rock songs.
I'm gonna do the Music Mates trick of, you've said everything I was about to say there. I was gonna say all of that.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that in a sense, Ethan has anyway like said a lot of what the good points of it are, but he's done it while saying I don't think it's necessarily all that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad song. I actually think it's pretty good, but I think for me, when you compare it with other songs that this band has done, it's not quite there.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand the plight of being like really into a band, but hating that their one song that they're famous for like isn't all that, especially as like a super fan of 14 by Wheatus. I couldn't relate.
No,
I think Radiohead as a sort of band
I was
feel that way
just
about
about
Creep.
to mention that.
Yeah.
I was just about to mention that there are so many bands out there where like so many hardcore fans of those bands, and not even just with music, with film, with TV, anything, where the most popular song by the band, people will be like, oh, I don't like that one because they got so many other better songs. But what they fail to recognize is that doesn't really stop it being a bad song. Whereas I think I've actually been quite fair in my assessment of Stairway to Heaven. I've met plenty of people who are huge Stairway to Heaven fans, and they're like, Stairway to Heaven, it's a bad piece of music. It's a bad piece of music. They probably like Endless Nameless, right? I mean, they don't really have the correct opinions a lot of the time, but it does happen often. And Creep is such a great example. But Creep is also funny because the band just refused to play it live for a really long time. I think in the last few years, Radiohead have started playing it live again. But I think in the 90s, no, later on in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, they just stopped playing their most popular, most famous song live. And I'm sure there's a variety of reasons because of that. I think the reason that people often attribute to it is that they want to be known for songs other than Creep, the band. But there was a really interesting interview with Tom York where he was asked, why doesn't Radiohead play Creep live anymore? And he says, oh, because that song used to be relevant to me when I wrote it, but now I don't really want to play it anymore because I don't feel the same way I once did when I wrote that song, which is a really interesting thing to say, I think. So I think we're about ready to wrap Stairway to Heaven. We're about ready to wrap Led Zeppelin up.
Wait, I hear something in the distance. It's Kashmir, the secret song.
Oh,
Sent into the upper atmosphere.
are we going to talk about Kashmir?
It's
then a
good.
little
There
bit?
you go. That's my notes. It's got good. I think we've
Yeah.
mentioned it a couple of times.
We have Kashmir is a great song, but I say never, I ever so slightly rarely listen to the Mothership or album version of that song, because the version of Kashmir that I often listen to, which I actually do quite often, is the live performance of it
With the head nod.
from their Celebration Day concert. Yeah, you know that video that I show you,
Yeah.
Harry, the one with Jimmy Page is doing that like weird head movement.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be the version of it that I'll listen to because I very rarely listen to live versions of songs 'cause I just don't think they sound as good or as whole, I guess, or as complete is probably a better word to use, as on the studio recording. But Celebration Day, the version of Kashmir, just oh my god, it packs a punch. Just if any of you have a chance, again, I've given you so much homework on this podcast at this point. But if you get a chance, go away and just listen to maybe the first minute of Kashmir from the Celebration Day concert, because just hearing that opening riff at loud in Wembley Stadium is just so good. Yeah, that's what I have to say about Kashmir. Apart from that, it's just a brilliant song. Full stop.
Right. So,
Yeah.
should we slap some scores on Mothership?
Yeah, I'll go first in the usual music mates way. So I don't think it's a surprise what I'm going to rate this album. I think it's brilliant. I think it's one of the best albums ever made. Even though it isn't really, because it's not a real album. It's a compilation album of great songs rather than a studio album. But I still do think it's fantastic. I don't really have any more to say that I haven't already said. Sorry, Led Zeppelin are a great band. I've listened to them for years now. They represent so many things that I love about music, about rock music, especially from every single instrumental point of view, from a vocal point of view, with Robert Plant's, very, very emotional and passionate lyrics and vocals from Jimmy Page's, I mean, these screeching guitar lines. And of course, the John Paul Jones on bass. He's a brilliant bassist, and so's John Bonham on drums as well. I think the way they all come together to create music is phenomenal, and I just don't think I've heard people do it as well as those four. I mean, Led Zeppelin are a seminal band in music history, and I just it doesn't get better than that, in my opinion. So I'm going to give Mothership Disc 1 a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I'll cut in. I do like it. I feel like I didn't spend enough time with it. It's probably one of those albums that, I don't know, if I happened to have it downloaded on my phone, I would listen to it all the time, maybe, and get really into it. But other than that, it's just fun to listen to. Had an alright time. I'll give it the coward 7 because I'm a hack. I'm phoning it in as a podcaster, but yeah, it's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it an 8. Because I mean, there's some good songs here. It does feel weird to rate it, but yeah, I mean, I've said all I feel about the album and particular songs on this, so I'll leave that there.
Well, the fundamental problem with Music Mates is that it's really hard to talk about music, and I actually think that I've gotten worse. Like, it's really hard to talk about music. I hate rating albums. I feel like if I look back at all the ratings I've given and listen to those albums again, all of my scores would change because it's all about, more than any other art form, I feel like it's about what mood you're in when you're listening to it, or like what you're doing while you're also listening to it. So I hate having to give scores.
But you've got to.
Yeah,
You think anyone reads the articles anymore,
I could
Harry? It's all about the
could just give it a
number.
1 and then retcon it later.
Right, God.
Yeah.
Harry, don't do that because it might not be a mediate over 30, which is what we all aspire to.
Look, I'll give it a 9. It's been a 10 some days. If we'd have recorded this like last week when I was having a great time listening to it, I was like, yeah, definitely a 10. But today it's a 9, and you know, that's just how it goes. You know, that's music mates, baby. My famous catchphrase. Yeah, I'll give it a 9.
It's just one of those days where you don't give it a 10. Okay.
It's just one of those days.
It's one of those days.
Yeah.
I feel it's easier to talk about songs when like you dislike them.
Yeah, which is why I'm excited to talk about the next album.
No,
Because the
don't
internet-
say that.
It's not bad, but but it's funny to play up that it's bad.
But do you actually?
So let's
do you
start with
actually
the
dislike
first
it?
song, Crawl.
What about my intro?
Ethan,
I've got
do your
some
intro.
comments.
Okay.
Oh yeah, oh fuck yeah, okay.
Yeah, there is an intro, Tony. I've
He's
got to tell
going
you
to
a little bit
stasis.
about. Got to tell you a little bit about our second artist. So, now we're going to go on to our other album for the podcast, released on December 10th, 2013 by rap and hip hop artist Donald Glover under his alter ego stage name of Childish Gambino. With his experimental fueled sounds and sharp witty lyrics, often politically charged or about alienation and social interaction, he's become a big name in the genre, and adding to the long list of talents he has of a writer, actor, comedian, and much more. But first, here's a bit of history. So Donald Glover was studying at NYU, part of a sketch group called Derek Comedy. This was where he caught the attention of Tina Fey, who saw his work and ended up hiring Donald Glover as a writer on her extremely popular sitcom 30 Rock, which ran from 2006 to 2013 for 7 seasons. A few years later, Donald Glover left the show and moved to LA, where he ended up being cast on another acclaimed sitcom called Community. A year before, he had released his first mixtape as an artist under the name Childish Gambino called Sick Boy. I think he was a big Trainspotting fan. His next mixtape, Point Dexter, actually came out the same day Community aired. His mixtapes were seen and felt as slightly immature compared to the more serious subject matter of his studio albums that came later. At this point in his career, Donald Glover was still part of Community, working as a stand-up comic and producing his own electronic music under the pseudonym McDJ. When he signed to Glassnote Records in 2011, he released his first official album called Camp. This was the predecessor to Because the Internet. His next move was to reduce the time he spent working on Community in order to spend more time working on his music career. He left the show permanently in 2013 and then released the album we're reviewing today. Because the Internet featured guest vocalists such as Chance the Rapper and Azalea Banks. Glover's next project was writing and starring in Atlanta, a surreal-esque comedy drama series set in the city itself. It debuted in 2016 and instantly saw commercial success, later winning an Emmy for his work on the show. Later on in 2016, Donald Glover began hinting at the possibility of a third album. Awaken My Love came out in 2016, another really strong effort at sound that combined funk and soul from the 60s, 70s, and showed a very impressive shift from Glover's more rap-based lyrics to a stretch of different vocal ranges. The hit Redbone earned Glover a Grammy and almost reached the Billboard's Hot 100. Glover's acting career properly took off in the following years. He had a brief role in Spider-Man: Homecoming, but it was playing Lando Calrissian in Solo: A Star Wars Story that was probably his biggest film role to date. The same year, Glover released This Is America as a single, which quickly became a viral sensation due to its controversial music video and highly political lyrics. The song debuted at the top spot on the Billboard 100 and absolutely swept the Grammy Awards, winning Song of the Year, Record of the Year, Music Video of the Year, and Best Rap Sung Performance. On top of all this, Glover wrote, starred, and released the second season of Atlanta, truly a standout year for the artist. In April of the following year, he would go on to collaborate with Rihanna on Guava Island, an Amazon film set in Cuba. He then appeared in the Disney remake of The Lion King. Glover released unexpectedly to his fans his fourth and to this date most recent album in early 2020. The album was called 3/15/20, the release date being the 5th of March 2020, so that's where the album name came from. The sound for the album was an even further departure from Awaken My Love, with more emphasis on a psychedelic nature, amping up the experimentation from Because the Internet. The result, for me, a pretty underwhelming result, but I still like some of the songs on it. I thought it was slightly too hollow, opting for something more weird for weirdness' sake. And that's about how things have been for him recently. I'm not sure when his what his next plans are. Hopefully, and I think Harry will agree with me, it's the next 2 seasons of Atlanta. I've been waiting years for them to get fucking made, and it's kind of annoying at this point that I have to rewatch the same episode from the first 2 seasons practically on repeat as often as I do.
Yeah, Atlanta it really is a phenomenal TV show. Absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. And Glover is not only the lead actor, but he and his brother write quite a lot of it. He's directed quite a few episodes. Like, he's a really fucking talented guy. Even before I'd heard it, I knew he had a music career, but I hadn't really heard any of his stuff. But yeah, just as like an actor and kind of creating Atlanta, I thought he was incredible. So it's great to kind of, with you picking this, actually listen to some of his music and see this kind of other side of him as an artist. And there's a lot of themes, I think, that kind of resonate across Atlanta and the album that you've picked. So it was cool.
Definitely, I
Themes.
would really agree with that. In fact, it was interesting because when I asked you what you thought of Because the Internet the first time you listened to it, you said it kind of reminds me of Ern from Atlanta. You kind of imagine you imagine his persona in his musical career to be similar to the persona he portrays in Atlanta, right?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And I think
Yeah.
it's interesting that Atlanta is kind of about like the rap game as well. But like he's not playing Paperboy. You know, it's kind of he's kind of got a lot of different personas. Again, another theme of this album is like how many different identities and like hats this guy wears. Yeah, and when you were talking about his acting career, you didn't mention The Martian, which like I mean, it's not the
Oh,
biggest
you're
role,
right.
but I think it was that was probably
Yeah.
kind of a breakthrough that he went from like comedy to being in a drama thing. But yeah,
That's
I mean,
true.
2017,
I'm gonna-
kind of 18 was a pretty insane year for him.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. The reason I didn't mention The Martian was because I read about it when I was looking up what happened to basically what his career has been like the last 10 years or so. And just like the film, I instantly forgot that I had read it and put it in my.
It's a comedy, it's a good comedy film.
Do you remember that?
It's not a good film.
Sick
It's
Iron
not
Man
it's
joke
not a
in
comedy
it.
film. Both of those things are wrong.
There's some jokes.
It's okay. It's an okay film. All right. So, I think similarly to Led Zeppelin, what we're going to do is I'd like some of you guys to kick off talking about Because the Internet, and I will, bounce off of it. If you want to talk about particular songs straight off,
Can I tell my
or
joke?
if you'd rather talk about general thoughts, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
so my favorite song is The Library. Well, hey, it's a joke because the song is 3 seconds long.
4 seconds long, I think you'll find, Harry.
Yeah, Jonathan would know.
This podcast is now officially a comedy.
Had the requisite 5 jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because like before, because for each album I work out what the average like song length is, and it's not really representative with Because the Internet, because it averages like 3 minutes, but like quite a few of those are just transitional songs that are below a minute and are sort of difficult to refer to as like a song by itself. Really, it's just something that makes the album flow rather than. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there are people that are just like, oh, today I really want to listen to The Library or Dial Up or Playing Around Before the Party Starts. Just like I'm really in the mood for like 40 seconds of ambience.
And it's in terms of length, song length. This album is quite long. Like you are right, it does have it makes sense that it would be 3 minutes average, because it's roughly an hour, and it does have 20 songs on it. It's not like I guess your average. I think maybe 12, 13 songs would probably be the average album that I'd listen to, and. When I was originally looking through, Because the Internet, because I basically went through his music in order. In fact, actually, I'll talk a little bit about why I decided to listen to his music in the first place.
Yeah, why did you pick this? Even?
Sorry?
Why? I think a good question is why did you
Yeah.
pick it? And also talking
Yeah,
about
I
the
was-
format
I was-
we listen to it in as well. That's another thing.
Yeah. I am going to mention that. So I've of course known about Donald Glover for a really long time. I've watched a couple of episodes of 30 Rock. It was pretty funny, but I never really got into it. But I'm a big fan of Community. It's one of my kind of go-to things to watch when I'm maybe a bit upset or I'm not feeling great and I want something to watch that will cheer me up, and that show never fails to do so. So I think that's where I first really saw Donald Glover as Troy Barnes, which is the character that he plays in that show. And then I think in later years, I actually discovered Atlanta. Well, I knew about the show because my mum had been watching it, I think, and every now and then I might have come into the room and watched a minute of it, but it didn't really grab me. But it was watching some episodes. In fact, the second half of the second season round yours, Harry,
Yeah, during a write-up.
because yeah. We were doing a
Mm.
write-off. It was the same night that we finished Sharp Objects as well. We just watched the season finale together.
Played Road
The scene,
Warrior
like the finale
as
of
well.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And and yeah, I think it was so the first episode that I had watched was maybe like half of the German Festival episode of Atlanta, which is really good. But it was the episode after that that was the Teddy Perkins episode where I was like, what is this show? It was such a it was I already mentioned surreal, but surreal is such a great way to put it because Atlanta does have this almost absurdist quality to it quite a lot of the time. Very, very odd things happen, but it's all, in the grounds of the real world, something that could conceivably happen. So to watch something like Teddy Perkins, which was just very, very unique, unlike anything I'd ever seen before in terms of an episodes of a show, I was like, I have to give Atlanta a go. And I'd watched basically the rest of the second season with you, which had other really great episodes. Woods, obviously the episode where they're kids, which is the flashback episode, which is also really really good. And then I ended up watching the whole show as a result, and I love the show. To date, it's one of my favorite TV shows I've ever watched. Maybe top five material. I recommend it to everyone that I know if they're looking for 20-minute episodes, quite short. It's only two seasons, and if they like kind of more surreal, kind of a darker side humor-wise as well, I would definitely recommend Atlanta. And it got to the point where I'd rewatched Atlanta with you, Harry, while we were living together up in uni, and I basically just said, okay, I clearly love this guy as an artist. Why don't I just listen to his music? I'm not a big fan of hip hop. I've never really listened to it properly, but maybe I'll give it a go and I'll see what it's like. And I listened to his debut album, Camp, and I really liked it. It was music that I had to get into because, like I said, it was almost I don't want to use the word alien, but it was very very different to stuff that I'd ordinarily listen to. But I liked it a lot. It took me a while to get into it, but I did end up really, really enjoying it and listening to his music quite a lot. And then I thought, well, if this album is really good, I want to listen to more of his popular work. So because the internet awakened my love, and even though Awaken My Love is more closely aligned with my personal tastes, I don't really listen to funk or soul music very much, but it appeals to me a lot more than hip hop and rap. But because the internet was the album that really stood out to me, and I'm to be honest with you, I'm not really really sure why. I think it's probably just because it's his most creative phase. His first album, Camp, is really good, but it's very disjoint. In the way that it's made, a lot of the songs don't really fit with one another. It doesn't feel like a concept album in that sense. It's just 13 songs that he wrote and decided to put together. But because the internet clearly has these very very strong prevalent themes that run from the start all the way to the end, and I think that appealed to me more. And I think Awaken My Love has a sound that I like a bit more, but the lyrical side of it isn't quite up to par with his usual work. So Camp has the better lyrics, but Awaken My Love has the better overall sound. And because the internet is that perfect halfway point where some of his lyrical work on this album I think is outstanding, but I'm also a really big fan of the creativity, the imagination that goes into creating some of these sounds. Sometimes it can be a little bit unpleasant, but to me, I really, really value the experimentation on this album. and that's what really compelled me to pick this for the podcast. I thought it would make a great thing to talk about. I kind of went through a phase of just basically consuming all Donald Glover related media. I watched his short film Clapping for All the Wrong Reasons. I watched Guava Island. I watched a lot of his stand up comedy. Listened to all of his studio albums. While I was rewatching Atlanta as well, and also rewatching Community for the second time. So I was clearly a little bit infatuated with him while I was listening to this music. But I decided to pick this album instead of Kasabian because I honestly thought it would be a more interesting album to talk about. So it would be really cool to hear what your thoughts are. Do you guys like it? Do you dislike it? What kind of things appeal to you? What do you think pushes you away a little bit more?
He also made us listen to it all as like one audio file.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
That's like another thing.
Yeah, and I did that because I did it. I did it. From what I'd heard about, because the internet, someone had basically told me that it has a. Oh, I can't remember the exact words they used, but from the way they described it, it sounded like it would be a good experiment to listen to the album all the way through without knowing when a new song ends and a new song, when the old song ends and the new song starts. So when I went on YouTube to listen to the album, I found a version of it which just had all of the songs together. And, the transition from one song to the next is borderline instantaneous as you would hear it on an album, on an actual MP3 recording of the entire album. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it because I don't know how you guys feel, but I think I think this album benefits from listening to it without knowing without knowing how it's structured. And it goes back to what Jonathan was saying about how there are, intermission songs, and then there are songs that are longer than others, and then there are some songs, to me, the best ones are the ones where it's hard to kind of pinpoint. It's kind of hard to pinpoint at times when you've moved from one song to the other, especially in the second half of the album. I know Jonathan doesn't agree with this as much as I think, but in the second half of the album, there are some songs like Zealots of Stockholm, where to me it's very it's almost jarring how the songs are basically created internally, where there will be these massive tonal shifts within one song, and you expect, oh, okay, so this is us moving on to a new song, and to me, it isn't. You find out when you hear a melody that you've already heard before, but a slight variation, you realise you've actually been listening to the entire song the entire way through. And to me, that was a very exciting thing to have listening to the album, to have that lack of stability, if that makes sense, to not really know where I'm at, to just kind of go from the start and see where I end. And I'd like to hear what you three thought of, and also what it was like then listening to the album for a second or third time, knowing when the songs stop and the new one starts as well.
It's definitely I don't know, it fits more doing it that way, I'll say. It's like that restaurant where it's like you eat your food entirely in the dark. I don't know if that's actually real. They might have made it up when they referenced it in the Green Hornet film. Anyway, uh,
Oh god,
it's underrated in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. I quite like it. I think this is definitely a style of music that I have heard before. It's like classic, like before the end times. You used to have these things called house parties, where multiple people from different bubbles of diseases could come and mingle without killing each other. And, this is the kind of stuff that would get played all the time, especially 3005, heard that literally 3005 times. And it's, it's all right. I don't hate it. I think listening to it with like the album titles, the song titles, is like, as Jono said, like you get a part where it's like, oh, okay, this is just the filler bit, and then the song starts in the next part. Okay, cool. Okay. Whereas it's more seamless when you're just doing it as one whole blind run, which is neat.
Yeah, because I find that when if you listen to a YouTube playlist of all the songs, then there's that short break. I mean, even with an ad blocker, there's that short break where that recording will end, and then the recording for the next song will start in the playlist. And I like the fact that if you find a version of the album where there isn't that, where okay, so some songs clearly do have a break in between the one previous ending and the next one starting. But I like how for Sweatpants, for instance, the way that that kind of just culminates with that final chorus, and then before you even really have a chance for a break, 3005 starts straight away, and the difference between the two sounds is pretty extreme. It's very very different, and I like the fact that with a lot of the songs on the album, um, you don't really get that chance for a pause. It's just going from one song straight to the next. I know we're talking about a pause that's a second long at most, but it's still enough for me. I still like the fact that when so many of the songs on this album end, the next one starts almost instantaneously, and Sweatpants and 2005 have that instantaneous jump where it's almost like they feel it almost feels like both songs are attached to the hip, like they're Siamese in that sense. And I like that the song has that. Sorry, I like that the album has that going all the way through for me.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the way that songs are named as well, you have, I mean, at the beginning you've got one, Cruel, two, World Star. Like he's sort of split it into, I guess that's four, five?
Yeah, it's about
Yeah,
four or five,
five.
I guess, mini playlists you'd call them.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's sort of what he's always trying to go for is like these, I don't know, he split it into sections and then into chapters basically. And this, yeah, sort of chapters kind of flowing into each other. Then you, for the first half, you've then got songs that the sort of transition between one section to another, and then yeah, between the last two, there isn't that. My feeling, I think, partly because it's I don't really experience music when I'm listening as sort of albums and whole things. That it was very different for me to be like listening to this whole thing as like a 1 hour thing. I don't know how I usually listen is I sort of go through a few things, like make a note of the songs I like and I might come back to later.
Hmm.
I think possibly it's just I don't entirely have the attention span when it comes to music to be like I'm gonna pay attention to what's happening over this next hour. Like I need those sort of smaller breaks in between. So for me, it didn't really work listening to it as one whole thing. Like there'd be bits that would sort of stand out a little, but I couldn't really get a feeling from it until actually going and listening to each individual songs. Then things kind of fell more into place for me, and I was able to be like, this is yeah, this is that song which has this bit. That there's that bit that I don't like, and it's in that song. It's I don't know. Part of it as well is when you're listening to it for the purpose of reviewing. Like I need to be having an opinion about
Yeah,
things, and it's so hard to grasp onto. Oh, I didn't like that moment 45 minutes in, compared to I didn't like that the intro to I don't know this song or whatever. Like
That's why I suggested it would be good to listen to it a second time through, knowing when the songs are, so that you can actually take out, concrete examples, which has happened,
yeah,
which is good.
yeah. But yeah, as I say, for me personally, I think for those two main reasons where this is not, I don't listen to music in hour bursts. Well, I mean, I do, but like not paying attention and getting a feeling for it, like in the background whilst I'm doing some work, maybe. That yeah, it's hard to do that for a whole album, especially when reviewing it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a fair thing to say. In terms of the playlists, if we're going to call them that the album breaks into, the best one is clearly the second playlist. that goes The Worst Guys, Shadows, Telegraph Avenue, Sweatpants, 3005. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
so.
I think Worst Guys is it's kind of a bit repetitive. I'll be honest. I got a bit tired of it. I like Crawl, which is earlier, and World Star made me think of the Bread Bank video. You know, you want to get in a fight, you're gonna put it on World Star. Yeah, I like Shadows a lot more.
Yeah.
Shadows is
a good
great.
yeah
Yeah, Shadows for me is one of the standout songs of
Yeah.
the album, along with Sweatpants.
Yeah. No, I actually think we have like the same opinion on a lot of the songs on this album, Jonathan, about which ones are good and which ones are bad from what I've talked to you. As for the worst guys, yeah, it's maybe right. The worst guys in World Star is the reason why I prefer the second half to the first half. Because to me, the second half doesn't have a weak song in it, but I think World Star is just bad. I don't like listening to it. It reminds me too much, and this was the thing, right? Because I felt like listening to this music for the first time, I was thinking, God, this is the kind of music I used to take the piss out of. This is doorbell music. But
yeah.
except it's not. It's actually quite good. I actually do enjoy listening to this because it has a bit. I don't know. It has more substance. Maybe I can't quite put my finger on it. But World Star was just one of those songs where I was like, no, this is just doorbell music. I don't. Yeah, it has that line about Martin Scorsese, which is pretty funny. But apart from that, it's very it's very generic. I like the way the song ends. I will say that. I think the way the outro where it breaks down into this very kind of typically Gambino outro really works, especially with the saxophone solo that actually kind of the song sort of leaves you with and fades out with. I think works really well, and it actually does make me want to sit through the entire song just to get that. But the texture itself that makes up the brunt of the song is just it's I just don't think it's I don't think it's pleasant to listen to. I can't say more than that. It just sounds ugly. To me, it sounds ugly. But yeah, World Star, and yeah, I know what you mean, Tony. The Worst Guys, it is a little bit repetitive, and it's kind of it's a very harmless song, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like there's really. I don't feel like you can really criticize the Worst Guys for being other than anything other than repetitive, even though it's I think one of the singles from the album. But it's not a song that I would call particularly risky or particularly stand out in a way from being good or bad. It's just okay, quite repetitive. When I listen to it, I just want to get onto Shadows as quickly as possible because Shadows is so much better. Um, but yeah, I mean, what do you guys think of like I don't know the first 5 or 6 songs from the album? Which ones you stand out as being good or okay? Not just the library. I don't want to hear that your favorite song is the library from this album.
Well,
Anything but the library.
Telegraph, I think, is probably one of the better ones earlier on.
Which one?
It's it,
Telegraph
Telegraph, the one after
Avenue. Yeah.
Shadows. Yeah, it's got that, you know, classic like from this album. It comes across with this very like relaxed, almost slow, like I don't know, beachside kind of chill vibe.
Yeah, I think what helps is the way the song opens, with kind of this in-album radio basically kicks off the song, and I really like that. And I think you're right. The music video definitely has a bit of a kind of relaxed, chilled out beach vibe to it. But I don't think it's just the music video. I think listening to the song, you can almost imagine yourself as you're listening to it. You know, driving somewhere, and you know it's a really nice day, and it's somewhere in I don't know, like LA or California by the coast.
Oakland is in California, so yeah, I think you probably agree is that that run of songs is the best because the three that have music videos are Telegraph Avenue, Sweatpants, and 3005. And yeah, if you add Shadows to the start of that, that is just the best stretch of songs, which we've said make up the kind of second mini playlist or act. Yeah, I like its kind of the first kind of few songs I think aren't as good. Like there's some good lyrics in there, There's some bad lyrics as well, like the reference to "Ain't Nobody Got Time for That." In 2013, probably holds up better than it does in 2021.
That's in Crawl, isn't it? Right?
Yeah. Whereas I
Yeah.
like the kind of theme of modern relationships and kind of loneliness that are in the second act. Like Sweatpants, I think is my favorite song, and that's a little bit more like the first bit. In it. It's kind of like I guess it's more kind of braggy, and more kind of like he's doing like what hip hop artists do, or trying to anyway. But yeah, I think it's definitely the best round of songs. Just quickly talking about the music videos, as the resident music video hater, I can say that they're actually pretty good. I think Hiro Murai might have directed all of them, and he did Atlanta with Glover as the director. And I think they're all very creative. Both Sweatpants and 3005 basically have the same gimmick, that it's like a one shot where things change each time to kind of humorous effects. Telegraph Avenue is like more conventional, but then has like a really fucking strange ending, which actually made me like the video. But yeah, it's a really solid stretch of songs, and if I was just reviewing that, I would score the album very highly. But some of the other songs around it, like before it and after it, I don't think are as memorable or as kind of interesting.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. We will talk about Sweatpants 3005 because they are I think they are very interlinked as being the two most well-known songs from the album, just full stop. 3005 especially, I think, apart from like maybe Redbone and This Is America, is probably his most well-known song after those two, unless I'm forgetting another really, really famous one.
Anyway, the album, Sweatpants is one of those songs that, I don't know, it starts off being like kind of bad but good, and then becomes actually good. Is how I would phrase it. It's
It took me a while to work out if I liked or disliked the "Are You Eating Them?" Just
it's very
annoying
silly,
inflation
but at the
there.
same time,
Yeah.
it's like yeah, it's kind of got a beat to it. To be fair,
Yeah, it really, especially since I feel that this song is sort of it's a scathing kind of sarcasm on some of, I guess, the other sort of artists like this, where it does just feel like kind of digging a knife into a shoulder blade, sort of like getting at someone. I don't know, feels effective. I initially wasn't sold on it, but I've come around on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I would agree with that. I think just from reading the lyrics, you can tell it's someone that he's got a problem with, and I think that problem with is a lot of the people who dislike his music for reasons that he probably finds, I guess, quite superficial. So there is definitely that
Also,
going on there, and I think
yeah.
Sweatpants is just an example of just absolutely. I mean, how great his lyrical wordplay can be. I mean,
He works in fuckboy
Yeah,
like
the best lyric in
Socrates,
the
like
entire album.
oh
yeah, that's great. That's
yeah,
great. And
yeah.
there's also I'm trying to think of what my favorite ones are. That one's really great. There's a line about Jeff Goldblum. I'm too fly Jeff Goldblum, and Jeff Goldblum was in a film called The Fly where he transforms into a fly. I think that's really really great. That's clever. And there's also the one where he says, "Got a glass house in the Palisades." That AKA White Hood, OKKK, and I think that's really really clever. A lot. And that entire second verse just goes from one line to the next where it's like, how did you even come up with that?
Yeah, as I say, it is very smart. His songwriting. You know, like what is it? The line from like Atlanta, where it's like the weird creepy Michael Jackson monster. It's like, yo, I don't like rap, and then he gets dunked on because he's wrong. Rap is sick, actually. Yeah, there's like a breakdown part in Telegraph, which is like also really good as well. And Sweatpants as well has some sick beats that are
It
hashtag
does.
fire.
It does. And I had I had the same thing that Jonathan had when I first listened to it. I was like, is this a good song? Again, it's a bit world starry. It's kind of just a generic doorbell music. But then I watched the music video and I just got into the groove so much more. And then I actually had a look at the lyrics and I was like, God, there is some really smart stuff going on here. And I think one of the most impressive things about it is again, well, one of the most impressive things about rap music is the rhythm that you speak out. Obviously, it's very very quick, and I've heard some songs, not necessarily by Childish Gambino, where rap artists are able to sing or speak lines at such an insane pace, but there's still a clarity in what they're saying. And I think this song has that, especially in the second verse, before before the song properly starts to come to its end. I mean, the speed that he's singing at, that he's talking at, is just it's incredible. It's incredible. I just don't think I would ever be able to do it. Not that that's a particularly high bar, obviously. But how he goes from one line to the next, it's always very very snappy and very quick and very witty. And every 2 or 3 lines, there's something I hear that makes me chuckle, that makes me go, that was quite clever. I like that. If it's yeah, no, it's really great. There's also the line about Sofia Coppola. There's also that really really cool line where where he says that thing about the Fisker, and the song stops, and he just goes, Fiskers don't make noise when they start up, just so you know, and the song comes back in. And again, it goes to show how creative I think this guy is, with how he can structure songs and how he's able to find new ways to not just do the same thing over and over again. I mean, when we did Led Zeppelin, we were talking about how songs they are really really good, but they have one beat basically and one melody, and the song kind of riffs off of that. Whereas I actually think in because of the internet, whether you agree or disagree, he does find new ways to, even when he repeats verses or repeats choruses, add another layer to it that you wouldn't quite hear before. And I think that's really, really cool. So yeah, Sweatpants is great. Music video is really good as well, which is basically him at a diner as he kind of... it's basically got Harry said it, it's got kind of like it's got a similar thing going to 2005 where Donald Glover basically is in this diner and something causes him to get up and then leave through the back door just for a second, and then when he walks through the back door, he basically comes in through the front door of the diner, and that happens a couple of times, and each time he comes back in, it has a Being John Malkovich thing where people in the diner, more and more of them start to basically be him and have his face until he comes back in for the third time, I want to say, and everyone there is Donald Glover. There's Donald Glover, the waitress. There's Donald Glover, the person sat at a table, and it's very creative. Take what you want from that. Take whatever message you may. I think it makes you think, at least, and I think it's memorable as well.
Yeah, it combines some of my favourite things to do with music videos, which is sort of long, drawn-out shots and cross-dressing.
Yeah. And after Sweatpants, there's 3005, which is a song that I don't mind. I used to not be keen on it. I think I've grown into it more, and it's just because of that chorus. I like the way the chorus breaks down, where it properly kind of sets off. I really like that. But that's kind of it. I think the lyrics are really good. Again, it has great example of the emotional depth that Donald Glover has. But it's that chorus that I think is too poppy for me. It has too much of a mainstream sound for me that when I hear it, I'm like, oh, you kind of pushed me away from the song a little bit. I mean, what do you guys think of 3005? Do you think it's a good song?
I mean, apart from the fact that I do have some kind of like fatigue from like hearing it so many times, I think it's alright. Like, I think there's one thing that's really good in this album is that sort of blend of like more traditional vocals and Childish Gambino's fast rap. You know, there's a good contrast there. But I also think that 3005 and Sweatpants, you know, and some of the other songs, there is serious doorbell syndrome in this album. The backing track, like, I guess the instrument, whatever the default like techno sounds are used. There's like beep boops, you know. They're very thin. It's like it's like not much is happening in the song other than the vocals. And for me, because I have like a poisoned brain and I have to be paying attention to 100 things at once or I'm bored, it's kind of not enough for me, you know. I need like fucking like Megalovania to be remixed with 8 other songs at once, and that's enough, you know. But this is just like there's the vocals, there's maybe one other like backing track, and other than that, I'm like, you know, it's kind of sparse.
But you don't think that that kind of, I guess, lack of wholeness, if that's what you want to call it, allows you to pay more attention to what he's actually saying.
I guess I do think that's what he's trying to go for me, and it is. I do see why you would want to do that, but for me, it's like yeah, it's I don't know. I wish there was also something else in there that could add just a bit more intensity to it, especially since like although his rapping's very good, you know, he's a lot better than Dan Bull, you know, of Dragonborn fame,
Okay, okay, I'm gonna take over.
who's rapping. Dovahkiin.
There
He's a lot quicker. He's a lot
so
faster, and he can, you know, songwrite a lot better than my Dragon Shout flow is sweeter than a soda
okay.
stream.
3005 is I think it's a pretty good song. Like I definitely agree that it is kind of like basic and poppy. But I think one of the things I like about it is like the more you actually pay attention to the lyrics, like the more interesting they are. I know that Donald Glover is kind of into a lot of existential stuff, and this album, it's almost like another OK Computer, that it's about like being alienated in like a world of like advancing technology, and how that it's the Black Mirror thing of like, you know, how we're all connected but we're all like actually alone. There's a lot of that in this album, which I guess was less played out in 2013, but it's still pretty good. And 3005 is a good example of that. This entire like narrative arc across this like stretch of really good songs has all kind of been about like relationships, and I think it's interesting that 3005 it sounds like it's about a relationship, but it's really about just being like really lonely and just kind of wanting anyone. And I really like that. One thing that we've just not mentioned about this album is that it's based on like a 70-page screenplay that Donald Glover wrote about a character called the Boy who's like rich and kind of alone. So technically, this album is one ongoing story about a third character that's not Donald Glover or Childish Gambino, but it's called the Boy. And he made a short film, and on like online interviews, like went in character as this person. So this is not only an album, but it's like a cross-platform multimedia kind of storytelling exercise, which is just like an interesting thing that we haven't actually mentioned about this entire thing.
Yeah, well, that short film that I watched, clapping for all the wrong reasons, got released alongside this album. It's 2013,
Yeah, I think that's the
and
prologue to the ongoing narrative of Because of the Internet.
yeah, exactly. Because I didn't know this until you mentioned it, but in the short film, it is that it's 25 minutes, if that, and he just basically plays Ern from Atlanta, or someone that has the same kind of mopey, very kind of unanimated, quite downbeat character that he plays really really well, and he is living in this huge mansion, and this mansion is populated by I guess quote unquote friends, people who basically stay there and live there, that he kind of interacts with over the course of the 25 minutes, but doesn't really seem to have much of a profound connection with. And in this short film, there are a couple of scenes where he's in his studio in a room with I think someone who I imagine is probably Ludwig Göransson, listening to some songs, and they're kind of editing them, and the songs are songs that I recognize from this album. And I thought that was very interesting. So to have Harry basically come along and say, "Hey, Ethan, did you know that this album is based on a fucking 72-page screenplay?" I was like, "Okay, that makes sense. I think I know what clapping for all the wrong reasons was now." And it is really cool. I think it is really cool. In terms of 3005, I don't think it's that basic. I think musically, in terms of from an instrumental standpoint, it is quite basic. There isn't there isn't anything there that makes me go, this song stands out. But again, I think lyrically, it's a very special song. It does combine that. It does combine that that emotional depth that I was talking about with the level of wit that he's so great at doing. You know, using word plays is often a recurring thing that he does that I think makes you really appreciate how technically gifted he is at forming lyrics. And I think the first and second verse has that. The way he's able to combine the two is really I think it's great. I think it's great. In the first verse, you have some lines like "God, it's dripping like Gaza," and it's just short, very I mean, so I'm talking 5 or 6 sentence phrases, but the way that those phrases are formed leave me going, "Wow, that was I couldn't come up with that." And to have then each line rhyme with the next as well, I think it really gives the songs a sense of momentum. And the second verse ends with that really emotionally resonant line, which is between us. I think there's something special, and if I lose my mental, just hold my hand, even if you don't understand. Hold up. And I think that's what it does so well, which is what you talked about, Harry. There is what he is essentially talking about is stuff that is resonant. It is stuff that you can attach to, that you can feel some kind of connection to, something that you can have empathy with, basically. Um, but while there's all of this very human exploration going on in his lyrics, there's still this very clever, very smart lyrical wordplay that I think the entire album has, and I think we'll get onto Life the Biggest Troll at some point soon, but I think that song as well is another example of just how great some of his lyrics can be. So one last thing, I would like to talk about the music video and what you guys think of it. Again, Harry said that it's similarly to Sweatpants. It is kind of one shot, but each time it goes back to where the camera originally was. There's something different happening. It's layered like that, kind of like Dodgeball. Sorry, I had to make that joke. And and so 3005, 3005 is set on a Ferris wheel, and Donald Glover is sat on obviously one of, I guess, the podiums. I'm not even sure what you'd call it. And there's like a stuffed teddy bear with him, and the camera's just kind of fixated on them. And each time the chorus hits, the camera does this kind of this cool sort of very dizzy spin where it kind of looks around the Ferris wheel before it goes back to Donald Glover. And each time the teddy bear feels like it's becoming more and more alive. And I think on the second chorus, just before the outro, when you look in the background, it seems like there's this rampaging fire happening. That's I don't think it's unnoticeable. You definitely see it, but because the background is so blurry, it's hard to make out exactly what it is. But it does look like something that's alight. It does look like the landscape is slightly on fire in the distance, and I just wanted to know, for the ones of you that had watched the music video, what you thought of it. If there were any kind of takeaway messages, if there was anything that kind of jumped out at you from watching it.
The main thing I got, because I was mostly paying attention to sort of inside looking at the bear and it getting more sort of bedraggled each time, and the sort of lifeless expression that Childish Gambino has throughout, whilst he's sort of saying these lines that sort of mixed in with the pop song sort of sound of it all, makes it all feel like an empty love song. Basically, this whole kind of the idea of like, oh, I'll stay with you till 3005, and then there's just this bear that he's not looking at, not showing any actual emotion towards, that is being more alive than him, with each shot getting more sort of broken and torn, and then sort of ending with Childish Gambino not being there. Sort of seems to the visuals of it more spoke to the sort of idea of, I don't know, sort of empty love song type thing of like someone that is sort of good with the words and sort of takes you away, but sort of isn't actually in it for the long game. And I like near the end, I kind of noticed there were sort of lights off in the distance, but I just sort of thought, it's potentially been there from the beginning. That was just like lights off in the rest of the carnival. I never really thought, oh, the background's on fire.
Well, that
So
was the
that's
first thing I thought of when I knew the song was called 3005, so it's clearly set in the future. Um, and whether it's in the lyrics or not is a different question. I personally don't really see it as much. Although actually maybe I do a little bit. In lines like the floor is not sorry, not the floor, but the got so high off volcanoes, the flow is so lava. I do kind of see it a little bit, but that was the first thing that came to mind. Yeah, for a song set in the distant future, it almost looks like the apocalypse is happening in the background.
see,
That's what
I don't
immediately
see it
jumped out to me.
as being in the
Yeah,
future
it's
so
not.
much as more. I mean, I haven't properly looked at the lyrics, but the feeling I get is like, I'll be with you always. I'll be with you until a time so ridiculously far off in the future. Like, it's like now, as oh, Ethan, I'll be your friend until 3005. Like, I'm not saying we are in the year
No, I know that.
2950 and we've only got 55 years of friendship left. It's
I know that. I know
I
that.
took
I
it
know
as an
that. And
exaggeration
I
rather
wasn't
than
trying to
future.
imply that I thought that the video was set in the literal year 3005, that it was set in the distant future. But the fact that 3005 to me is a year in the distant future, and in this video, to me, it looks like something fairly apocalyptic is happening in the background, is the link that I see. And of course, you're right. You're absolutely right. 3005 is to do with the longevity of something. I mean, in that pre-chorus when he talks about being right by your side till 3005. Sure, no, that's what I see first and foremost. But I think the music video can have other things going on in it that you can sort of be drawn attention to, and that for me was definitely one of them. Whether you agree with it or not.
I am like very
Yeah.
aware of the fact that this podcast is very long, so we probably should move on. But I also have things to say about this music video. Um, yeah, it's good. Like I don't want to spoil where this album is going, but it is an album about existentialism and like alienation in like our modern world and trying to kind of find the answers through connecting with people and failing. And it ends basically with the a realization that we're all going to die and there's nothing you can ever do about that. And it just goes back to the start of the album because no answers were kind of found and no solutions were found. And it's very easy to see this kind of continuous camera move around a Ferris wheel that just keeps going on forever is kind of life, right? And the bear just gets more and more disheveled. Things at the end are on fire, and then you're gone by the final cycle. Yeah, I think that's what it's about. I think it's such a ridiculous idea of being with someone for 1,000 years, you know, or however many years, like 900 something. Um, because you never live that long, and it's out of loneliness, kind of, and the upbeat kind of nature of the song compared to just the kind of ridiculous plea of like, please just stay with me for this long. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to die. I think that's ultimately what the album is about by the end of it. There are so many lyrics, and I haven't really looked into them, but that's just what I got from a few lessons, and I think the music video supports that. Like especially like I don't want to just skip the entire album to Life the Biggest Troll, but that is definitely the most kind of profound song. I think it's not the best, but it's one of them, and I think it kind of culminates in a lot of the themes they're building up. And obviously, songs like Zealots of Stockholm have this like such a jarring kind of shift in them of kind of being like turning like really hard, and that's one where I actually did look up what's happening in the kind of story that he's trying to tell, and it's about awaking from an overdose to find out your parents have died, and then kind of like just kind of retreating online to try and find like I don't know some answers. But yeah, I think there's a lot going on in this album, and it's pretty good, and it's very depressing when you actually like think about it or kind of like read any interpretation of the lyrics or listen to them a bit more carefully, uh, compared to the upbeat nature of some of the songs.
I actually think that the ending of End of Evangelion is more upbeat than this album. That's my take. That's my take. So should we carry on to the I guess the next semi playlist? Although we can probably just group up these next 5 or 6 songs as one playlist, even though they're built up of even though they're built up of 2 separate ones. So there's the weird party subplot, isn't there? Harry, you had some when I talked to you about this. You actually had some really cool ideas about these next few songs. So do you want to just go through them?
I'm being put on the spot because I don't. But I like the piano that starts it. The party again is a song that kind of ends abruptly. And if this album is kind of about this character of someone who lives in a mansion but is kind of like alienated, like realizing pretty much like I don't know like a minute into the song that he actually wants everyone to get out. No Exit seems to be about a murderer. um, or like begging someone not to leave. That's all I have to say. I don't think these songs are as strong. Like I like Flight of the Navigator. I know that's in the next arc. I like that a little bit more, but it is like way too long. Honestly, for me, until we get to kind of Pink Toes, I guess Zealots of Stockholm and Life the Biggest Troll, I kind of lose interest at this point. I don't think the songs are as strong, and none of the lyrics really speak to me as they did in songs like Sweatpants, where they're like really funny and the delivery is like I can tell he's like a really talented lyricist and rapper. Whereas this stuff, I don't know, it doesn't work for me as much.
That's fair. I actually think what we probably could do is just talk about these next 10 songs or so as a whole, because similarly to you, I think I have less to say, even though I think I prefer the second half. The playing around before the party starts and then the party no exit is maybe the weakest arc of the bunch. Even though again there is clearly a heavy dose of imagination in those, in like you say how the party kind of it's sort of it has this almost I'm trying to think of the right word to it. It has this almost exasperated feel to it, where he starts singing, and then the tempo that he's singing at gets faster and faster and faster until you expect him to start hyperventilating almost, and it ends with him just saying, "Get the fuck out of my house," pretty much. And I really like that. Again, I think it's an inventive way to compose a song. It of course has a narrative, even if it's very short. I mean, we're talking 2 minutes long. It still clearly has an arc within it, and I think this entire album is full of very neat little ideas like that, that really stick with me. And I think the next really good song is Flight of the Navigator. Yeah, maybe it is a little bit too long. Maybe it is. But when I listen to Flight of the Navigator, um, it has this. It's weird. I don't think I've really looked at the lyrics for that song. So I don't know what he's trying to get across with it. But listening to it, I do have this liberating feeling, and it comes from that acoustic riff. It comes from the riff that kind of plays throughout the song. It does feel like I'm literally taking flight as I'm listening to this. It has a very very freeing, weightless feel to it that I like. Jonathan, Tony, do you have anything to say about the last few songs that we've talked about up at this point, or am I okay to go on to the next few?
Flight of the Navigator. I think whoever brought up OK Computer earlier was right, because this is the fitter, happier, more productive part of the album. Death by Numbers, I think we skipped over, but that one's earlier on, right? Yeah, that's right before Flight of the Navigator. It's got like a cool start to it. Like I think this branch, this sort of arc has some interesting sounds in there, but they kind of don't. I don't know. They don't do much. Like Death by Numbers, it's like techno-y, it's cool, and then it just sort of ends. And No Exit is kind of warbly, but I think that one's a bit better. It has like that sort of intense rap that's good. But yeah, after that, I've got a couple notes about Free Info, which is that it's probably one of the better ones. It's got quite a neat texture. And I think it's what uh, Gambino is good at. It's got that building rhythm. Um, yeah, but I don't know. I think it's overall stronger probably in the like early-ish parts and later on. I think.
Mm.
For me, heading into just kind of loosely, I mean, like the last 9 songs on the album, sort of, I think they as a whole have this kind of darker feel to them. They sort of feel kind of less structured than some of the earlier bits. It kind of, I don't know, it falls apart a little. I think in a way that's kind of narratively works, I think, in terms of having sort of reached 3005, if that's kind of like the like a fairly structured and poppy thing, being like, well, realizing the inevitability of death, and then it kind of falls into this sort of losing clarity, sort of darker tones. But the songs don't leave much of an impact on me. I sort of prefer the earlier half, and don't really have much to say about these last ones. I sort of struggle to really particularly differentiate particular moments. Particularly, it all just feels like one kind of unstructured, dark feel.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. I think you've highlighted why I might prefer the second half of the album, even if I have maybe more to say about the first half. It is, I think, that tendency towards experimentation that I think the second half of the album does better than the first half. You're right. The first half is quite clear cut, in where the songs start, where the songs end, and a lot of them have more of a mainstream feel to them. Where, I mean, all the singles from the album are in the first half, whereas the last 10, there is, you're right, there is more of that, there is that darker, looser feel to it, I guess.
Yeah, I feel as well, if there's a like 72-page script that is sort of lined up with this, it does feel like you've kind of got this story of something more grounded initially, and then this kind of climax moment where I don't know, sort of beginning to feel properly out of touch, and then you have this sort of end of it all kind of culminating.
So, we are coming to the end of Because the Internet, and there's really one song that I would like to talk about because I think out of the entire album, it's one of the standout songs. When I just listen to music by Gambino in my spare time without listening to it in the context of a full album, this is one that I often revisit to. It's a long song, and the way that it's structured is it doesn't really have a chorus. It has a chorus towards the start, I guess, but after that chorus, it's pretty much just a stream of consciousness, if that makes sense. It's just kind of one long verse afterwards that has different stages, and it messes around with with different melodies, but it is just basically one massive verse, and I really like it a lot because it reminds me a lot of a song from his first album, the final song on that album, actually, on Camp, which has an anecdotal style to it, where it's him talking about an experience he once had while at a summer camp. Um, and I think this song is a really great way to end the album because it kind of summarizes a lot of feelings that he has about a variety of different topics, and you get taken on a small journey from the start to the finish, where he talks about a woman that he's recently met that he seems to be starting having a really, really solid connection with, but of course his insecurities get in the way, and the result that you have is a final part of a verse that to me really, really hits on quite a deep level when I'm listening to it, which I often do when I go on a walk out at the moment, just for half an hour or so. when I get to the end of the song, and he delivers that final line, um, life is the biggest troll, but the joke is on us. Yeah, the joke's you showed up. I always go back and skip it about 40 or 50 seconds and listen to from the line where he says, where he basically starts talking about this new person that he's met, and listen to it again, because um, there's it's not just lyrically that I think this song really shines through towards the end. Like I said, on quite a profound level, but I think it's also in the way that he just delivers those lines. I can't think of a time on the album really when he, to me, sings with as much passion or as much energy as he does when he really feels like he gets into the rhythm or the swing of what he's saying. It's like that moment where it starts off really personal, and then all of a sudden he kind of boosts himself up a little bit, and he kind of gains that energy, he gains that momentum, and then all of a sudden he goes from talking quite quietly to like dropping a beat, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So I think it's a really strong song to end on. And there's of course the fact that the song's I guess second title is Andrew Orenheimer, which when I first listened to the song, I was interested in finding out who this person is, and Andrew Orenheimer is an American computer hacker who is known under the pseudonym Weave, I'd never heard of. And of course, the chorus kind of references that, and again, it links back into the main theme being in this album, the internet and the advancements of technology. And I think another interesting thing about Andrew Orenheimer, if you want to call it an interesting thing, is he's apparently associated with the alt right in America, and I'm sure that has a part to play in the title, considering Gambino himself has often written songs about race. Being obviously a black person in America, that's a huge part of your life, of your world. So I'm sure that has a part to play in the selection of Andrew Orenheimer being part of the title. And the last thing that I would like to talk about is the final part of the song, those last 4 or 5 seconds where it basically plays the library. But it plays something, it plays the library, i.e., the first song on the album, but it plays it slightly differently. Where this is, it's a very subtle thing, but I only noticed it recently when I was listening through to it again. When you first hear the library, it it's very short. Obviously, it's 4 or 5 seconds, but it sounds like something's about to start. Basically, it sounds like it's about to pump something up. But when you hear the same short 3 or 4 second sound at the end of the album, at the end of the song, it sounds more to me like it's on its way out, like it's kind of drifted out. It starts off as a very quick, rapid succession of beats, and then slowly fizzles out. Whereas at the start of the album, it starts off slow and then kind of fizzles up, almost like it sounds like a playlist is about to start. Whereas at the end, the playlist has come to its end and kind of affirms the cyclic nature of the album that Harry was talking about when we were discussing a different song, about how you kind of go on this journey with Donald Glover, where he asks questions about himself, about the world, and there is that tragic realization at the end that you kind of go back to where you started. It's a very cyclic nature, and I think the way the album ends really serves to highlight that. So that's what I have to say
Yeah,
about Because the Internet. Not Because the Internet,
there,
Life the Biggest Troll.
there's a lot of other kind of things about like you saying it sounds like an album starting up for a playlist because Zerts of Stockholm is the song that kind of breaks, and it's really cynical. Like it kind of starts one way with a kind of more, I guess, like heartfelt, honest thing, and then you get that really kind of abrupt sound, and then it ends with like really kind of like depressing and cynical lyrics, And then in the kind of, I think it's called Urn, the track that's like in between it and Pink Toes, you can hear like a cassette being loaded in, and then Pink Toes is a lot more kind of uplifting. It's almost like it's a song that's being played in the narrative of this person's life. So I think that's interesting, and obviously, like you say, with the last few seconds kind of being the first few seconds, but it kind of it almost sounds not reversed, but it kind of sounds like the opposite of it. I definitely think you're onto something there. I guess I kind of read it in the same way I read the music video that you made us watch. Of it's kind of life be kind of going in circles and nothing really being achieved until suddenly you're not there and everything's on fire and you're dead. And that I think that's kind of a big kind of theme of the album. I think it's a really good song, like you say, the stream of consciousness nature of it. I've listened to it as many times as I've listened to the whole album. I haven't really listened to it on its own, but it always stands out as being really strong and like a really emotional ending. And I think right before this one, a few seconds, the bit that really kind of stands out to me is just him just saying "you have to help me" like repeatedly. Is like the last few lines of the album, and like this entire thing, if this is like a soul searching exercise, and like trying to evaluate, I guess, his identity through like multiple characters and this like narrative he's trying to tell, and kind of the internet in 2013 and how it all kind of relates. And the point he reaches is just kind of hopelessness, and kind of pleading for help before the whole thing starts up again. It really is. It's a very bleak ending, but like I guess there's some hope to be found in some of the lyrics, you know, and this kind of like relationship he has with this person he meets and kind of creates genuine connection to. Like obviously I haven't delved too deep into the lyrics, but that's the sense I get from the song. Yeah, I think it's a really really strong song. It's just a shame that a lot of the things that come before it aren't really that good. Like Earth, the Oldest Computer, it isn't my favorite, you know. Pink Toes is okay, I guess, but yeah, it's an incredible song that ends a good album, I'd say. If all the songs were this strong, it would be one of the best albums we've done. But unfortunately, that's just not the case.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with everything you've just said about the song. It is quite heavy, and I was originally actually going to read out the last section of the verse of "Life the Biggest Troll," but I chose against it because it was too long. But I just wanted to basically show how strong that final section is. I mean, before he says "you have to help me," I mean that last entire section, like I said, from when he starts talking about this person that he's just met, who kind of seems to be sparking some creativity in his life from the end of the song. I think it just goes from one line up to the next. That's an absolute banger. And there's a real benefit to getting to the end of a Childish Gambino album. If you've listened to his other four albums, you'll know, I think, that as time goes on, he cares less and less about trying to embed the way he really thinks, or trying to embed with more subtlety some message, to the point where by the end of an album he will write a song that, like I said, is almost anecdotal. I mean, there's no uh, it's not really surface level. It's just a very obvious, no, this is what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to try and wrap it up in any kind of way. I want to sing about this and say this, so I will say it, rather than being interested in beating around the bush, or being more subtle in that way. And I think that's a real strength of this song, because, like you said, it stands out as the final song as a result, I think. Um, Jonathan and Tony, what do you think about the way that this album concludes? Not even just with this final song, but do you think it has a strong ending? Do you like
Wait. Really quickly, just let
Yeah.
me add. The Andrew Orenheimer thing, because this is an album from 2013, it would have just been a reference to him being arrested for being a hacker and nothing to do with him being like racist. Yeah, I think it would have been way before that was the thing.
Oh, okay.
From what
All right.
I googled it.
That's a later development. See, from what I remember, I think the earlier parts were a lot stronger. So like nothing. Either I just stopped taking notes, or it wasn't super memorable, the last part. Other than Pink Toes, I remember that one being pretty good. But no, the more, I guess, like, sort of lyrically interesting parts were like where the strength of the album is, in my opinion, is like in the earlier songs. You've got bangers such as he's got Renegade Raider, he's probably a pro. He just shot my back, I turn back and I attack. I just got a victory royale. A victory royale. That's not in the album, but anyway, uh,
I was trying to figure out what song that was that you were singing the lyrics for, and took me a second to actually realise what you were quoting.
yeah,
Forget it,
yeah.
Ethan. It's
So
semantics.
that's the only thing I have to say is just quoting the wrong song. But I don't know. I think the last ones it sort of gets a bit more like, I guess, mellow towards the end. But it's okay. I don't know. There's nothing that left a super strong impression on me.
Yeah, I feel similar to Tony in that my attention sort of began to drop around that sort of end. And so I don't really have any notes on it. But no, I mean, yeah, no, I think as a final song, it does sort of work to kind of finish it, and it is quite nice the way it does have, like, brings back the library as that kind of way of, yeah, sort of closing it, but in the same way that it begun, but it works.
Bringing it back full circle.
Yeah, yeah. I think in general, I feel the last few songs are worse, but that could just be that my attention span had dropped by the time I'd reached
The
this section.
classic mediate dilemma.
Yeah. Possibly if I'd gone through and, like, for each song, like, spent ages, like, looking through the lyrics and properly thinking what they mean, like someone actually reviewing an album, I probably would sort of, I imagine I very much would agree that it sort of is more interesting near the end. But as a shield that did none of those things, it didn't grab me as songs in their own right.
I'll start off because it's Music Mates and I picked the album, so I always give the base rating. And I think I was pretty blown away by this. Actually, I've listened to Because the Internet quite a lot since listening to it for the first time around October and November time of last year. And I was blown away because I already talked about it. I love rock music. It's my first and foremost music genre that I will always be attracted towards and listen to as an avid fan. And I never ever considered the possibility that I could like hip hop music because it just never seemed like it was for me. But being someone who went through a huge Donald Glover phase and deciding to actually take that step to try something new and also make you three try something new because I know none of you really listen to hip hop music either. I feel like it was a really interesting experiment, and for me, it was a great experiment because I walked away thinking that I'd listened to an album worthy of being one of the two albums to talk about on the Final Mediate podcast. So I quite clearly think it's 10 out of 10 material. I do think it's that good. So I will give it a 10 out of 10.
There's some good songs in here, and I imagine if I was to properly delve more into the themes, I feel I would appreciate it more. But sort of it's one of those things where if I rate it as an album of songs I'm likely to listen to, it's fairly low because there's some I may go back and listen to. But as a kind of concept album, I rate it quite highly. I think it's a pretty good concept album. And I feel like I would like to see a fully worked, like, something created from that 82-page script. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go for a 6. There's some good songs and neat ideas. And it's probably not a fair score to give it as a concept album.
Yeah, I think I'll slot in there and say that I do agree with Jono and say that I don't know if I had been like properly like fucking genius.com analyzing all the item descriptions of all the lyrics, I'd be like way into it more, because I think the sort of like meta narrative around Childish Gambino, that is told in this album, and also like in all the other stuff he's been a part of, and how he has this very storied life. He's a songwriter, actor, who's been all over the place, and I think that's very interesting to get like his perspective in music, and he does back it up with some incredibly like well delivered, fast spoken, rap beats that do be kind of fire, though, if I do say so myself. They're no chug chug with you, but they're up there. But that being said, I feel like, I don't know, musically, a lot of like the backing stuff in maybe hip hop in general, but probably just this album is just kind of a bit empty for me, kind of a bit like, I don't know, hollow sounding, and doesn't really have enough, I guess, like range in terms of like sounds. Like it feels like it's only like a very like sort of mid range. There's not much like high or low notes to it, and there's not a lot going on. So if you have like the disease where you need to have like 600 tabs in your brain open at once, you can't just focus on the lyrics, which is clearly the centerpiece of the album. Then you kind of left spinning, I think. But that being said, for what it's worth, it is pretty good. Is what it's trying out to do. There are some standouts in here. But I'm a hack podcaster. I can't review. I'm shit at my job. I'm gonna give it a 7.
Yeah, this is pretty good. I like this album. But I'm also gonna give it a 7, which seems pretty low for an album I've listened to like 4 times, I think. And that's just because I'm good at my job,
We've been outed.
No, I thought it was good. I think there's some really strong songs in there. And I like Donald Glover as like an artist, so it was good to kind of like actually hear Childish Gambino's music, see this complete other side to his persona. And I liked a lot of like the concepts I kind of gauged from listening to the album and like doing some like very, very kind of quick Googling. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd get a lot more out of it if I did like you say, genius.com. If I listened to that 8-hour podcast that dissects the entire album song by song, I'm sure I've read the screenplay and watched the film, I'm sure I'd be like, wow, this is an incredible narrative. But like, there's so many songs in here that I just don't want to listen to again. Like, we just skip because again they'd have an annoying beat or like another person doing the vocals who I didn't really like, and I didn't really get anything out of them. That I don't think I would be prepared to kind of invest that extra like effort into like really like, I guess, engaging with it on the level that some people do. It also just like the fact that I don't really listen to music outside of doing this podcast, and like, I don't know, occasionally like YouTubing a film scene so I can hear the backing track, like the Sunshine of Your Love bit in Goodfellas. That's about the extent I listen to music. So if the anime podcast was like Tony is trying to make us like anime, which that wasn't even the point of the podcast. But by the end of it, I'm like, Evangelion's like one of my favorite shows of all time, and like I would call myself an anime fan now. Music Mates has failed to get me to listen to music in my spare time. So I'm sorry, Ethan,
that's sad.
But you failed, and I think it's a 7 out of 10.
That's okay.
They can't all be victory royales,
Should we talk about Music Mates now?
Yeah, well, I was going to lead on to that. I mean, it brings us to end of Music Mates at this point here, and I know you say, Harry, that you wouldn't listen to music very much in your free time. I think you've given like 40% of the albums that we've rated a 10 out of 10, or you would on some days of the week. So obviously, there have definitely you will chalk it up to you don't really have a good contrasting system where you can compare it to other music. But there are clearly some albums that you listen to that you think are fantastic, and I think Tony and Jonathan here as well. So my main takeaway, well, not my main takeaway, but my main reason for doing this podcast wasn't really to make you guys enjoy music any more than you already do. But what I really wanted to do was to give you a selection of albums that I really love quite a lot, and would have hoped that you would listen to every now and then. Maybe not all the time, but as long as there's one album on this podcast, or not, maybe not even an album, just a few songs that you've heard through the, I don't know, 10, 15 albums that we've done all together. If there's a few songs that you've listened to that you think you will still listen to, I don't know, maybe 10 years from now, again, not all the time, but maybe once every now and then, that'd be a plus in my books. So I hope that's the case, and if that isn't the case, then I have failed. I have failed in what I set out to do.
I've listened to Beethoven's Fifth Opus quite a few times.
Oh, I was wondering if someone would make that joke.
Oh my god, I forgot we did Beethoven. I mean, are you three glad that we did this podcast? Do you see it as a massive waste of time? Or are you happy that you sat through all this music?
Broadly, is Mediate a waste of time? You know, that's we'll get into that some other time. Focusing particularly on Music Mates, I think definitely there are some songs that have, you know, achieved the rank of Jedi Master, and then I have gone back to and listened to, like, in my spare time. It was a lot easier on my old phone, where I had like the fucking songs downloaded and I could just listen to Violator every now and then. It was my go-to, like, just walking somewhere album. It would be like Violator, the Red Hot Chili Peppers one we did.
Those were the first albums we did as well. That's pretty
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. They were the ones that stuck with me. They were the ones that stuck with me, and, you know, a lot of my, you know, favorite songs are from, like, the Garbage album and the Rage album as well. So those are the main standouts. It has been good to get this sort of historic view of music, you know, getting this nice, you know, slice of time of where I can be, like, really, like, oddly knowledgeable about music. It's like, look, if it came out in 1989 or 2001, I'm fucked. But I can tell you about, like, bands that came out within that range. If they were bands that Ethan liked, I'm like, yeah, I've seen fucking Wheatus. I've seen the other ones that we also did. Limp Bizkit, they were there.
Tony, where did this
it's been
obsession
fun.
with
It's been
Wheatus
fun.
come from? Because you mention them all the time, and I don't speak about
I'm a super
Wheatus.
fan. I just love 40. There's a good story that my friends told me about Wheatus, and it's why it's in my head all the time, and it's where I've stolen the bit from. Basically, Wheatus came to perform at, like, our uni's venue, and you know how everyone is like, obviously Teenage Dirtbag, you know, that's all they give a fuck about. Why else would you go see Wheatus? And so my friend was there. He was like, all right, we got to change this. We got to fucking upset the system. And so they went on Spotify and were just, like, looking for, like, a random Wheatus song, and they saw 14, and they were like, all right. And they got, like, a chant going. They were like, yeah, play 14, 14, 14. And the band saw them in the crowd. They were like, oh my god, these are the real Wheatus fans. They're what we're here for. And they played 14 for them, and they were like, yeah. It was... Well, they had just fucking looked up another song. It's a great story.
I mean,
I've just
that is a very funny story.
Credit, but yeah. Anyway, Music Mates, the podcast we do.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a real success in terms of Tony. I feel like definitely he's been introduced to a lot of new music. For me, I think it's a bit because it's weird that I feel both stuck in my ways, and also the way I experience music now is just each week I listen to what random, like, songs Spotify wants to chuck at me, and then from that I pick the ones I like. So I'm both always listening to new music, but when going through new stuff like this, I don't know, there's just something where I'm like, because the ones I'm most likely to go back to are like The Breeders and Garbage, like maybe Radiohead. It's yeah, Pulp. Like they're the ones that like I came in knowing and liking. And sort of some of those newer ones, so Depeche Mode, just specifically Depeche Mode. Although I guess Bjork didn't quite land as sort of new
Didn't
ones.
quite
Say that
land as
again,
putting
pal.
it mildly. You gave it like a 1 or a 2 out of 10. Clearly had some pretty strong
2 out of
feelings
10.
about that album.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've got to take a stand with music. You know, if it puts you in physical pain,
Yeah, that's courage, you know. You don't just give things a 7 because your brain hurts too much to think about things. Yeah, I think if Ethan was going to direct a film about my life, there would absolutely be parts where I like am playing Fleetwood Mac, you know, and it's like, oh fucking, the chain comes on, and it's like I've got my headphones in and I kick a football or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely it's been, you know, like a I don't know, you like it's had an impact on the seasonal show that is my life. Um, so it's been interesting. It's been interesting.
Well, I am extremely happy to hear that. Genuinely, I will. Even if you're not listening to any of this music in 10 years' time, the fact that you would say that it had some impact, especially musically, on I don't know your time in sixth form and uni, is really really good to hear. So I am glad.
Yeah. To be fair, a lot of the albums you picked are way better than a lot of the shows Tony picked. I think it's just unfortunate that I decided to like anime. Um,
Yeah, I
that
had
makes
to
that makes
curse
me
you.
think that like Tony didn't even introduce me to Evangelion. I just did that on my own. So like the percentage of like albums you picked that I liked and like actually have listened to like just occasional times, like technically it has had a bigger impact on my life. But I think the thing that we've never talked about is I think this was 2016. This was just before the podcast. For some Ethan, you like burnt 2 CDs with a lot of your favorite songs on and gave them to me, and I listened to them. So, and a lot of those songs have gone on to be like from albums that we've covered. So like every time I hear it, I'm like, well, I already knew the songs. That's why I like it. But yeah, I think low key that's probably had a bigger impact on like the type of music and like discovering like OK Computer, which I say is probably my favorite album. That was from you just like giving me a CD that you burnt full of like songs you really liked. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's not technically Music Mates. It's like the prequel to it. But I mean that had a pretty big impact.
Yeah, no, I do remember doing that. I remember doing that for quite a few of my friends. During sick form, I was like, well, I want to get them to listen to music, but I know that if I just give them a list of songs, they won't do it because people are too lazy and they just want to listen to their own music. But if I actually buy blank CDs from a shop and then get some software where I can actually burn music onto the CD and give it to them, then they'll be more compelled to actually listen to the music because I've gone out of my way to actually, put in the effort to give them songs they listen to, and it seemed to work because I can definitely think of a couple of people who I made like birthday playlist CDs for because it was something that I just did for people when it was their birthday during sick form, and they ended up liking quite a lot of the songs that I gave them, which was always really good to see. So it's completely possible and almost certainly very, very probable that I did do that, even though I kind of do remember that. I think the memory from sick form that I have the most in terms of music mates that wasn't actually recording the podcasts was the time where it was after the second podcast that we did or something. And in sick form, I was trying to think of a bunch of different albums to choose, but I couldn't figure out which ones I wanted to choose because I liked them all. So I basically made you all listen to two or three songs from
Oh
every year in the
fuck!
90s.
I forgot this was a thing.
Yeah.
Shit, I remember this.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the picks that you went with, I just didn't go with in the end, even though I was going to. They all changed. I mean,
Yeah, I have a bunch of I was just about to say I have a bunch of albums on my phone. Which are like the things you never picked.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Because I was planning on picking them for sure, but then something would happen along the lines, and I'd listen to other music, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm going through this right now." So I mean, it before I listened to Childish Gambino, it was 100% going to be Kasabian by Kasabian because that's like my all-time favorite album. But I didn't think we would be able to spark up a discussion as interesting about Kasabian than we would have had about Because of the Internet. But maybe I'm just plain wrong about that. Maybe you guys would have enjoyed listening to Kasabian more, but I thought Because the Internet was an interesting experiment, considering it was outside of all three of your tastes and kind of comfort zones musically. So I thought it would be a cool thing to pick. Yeah, no, I am. It's really nice to hear that all three of you did at least like some of the music that I picked, even if it's not all of it, and especially Tony to hear that it has had quite a sizable impact on a few years of your life. Is well, it's really
Not all
nice.
positive, definitely not, but still an impact. Yeah, it's been good. I'm worried now that I'm off the chain of music mates. That I have gone rogue. I've always been like, I'm like garbage when I listened to it the first time. It like overplayed and started playing like the second album, and I'm like, this is forbidden music. This isn't on the spreadsheet. I can't listen to it. And now I'm like, oh, I could just listen to it now if I wanted to. But I'm just like whenever I'm not fed something directly for a podcast, I just sit in stasis or play League of Legends or do anything else equally destructive for my own life.
Wake me when you need me.
As I go into a fucking cryo chamber until fucking, I don't know, Mirror's Edge needs to be reviewed.
I think the highlight of this podcast was when Tony listened to like a concert album Bjork performed as a child.
Yeah, when I listened to the entire Christmas Bjork album when she was like 7, I was like, he's really picking some weird ones, you know. It's like it's like Niklaus, tra la la la, whatever, like fucking Swedish or a sick beat is playing, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm feeling this one. It's almost as bad as that time when I watched half of like The Wrong Old Boy. And no one told me that there was a different old boy, and I'm like,
because Obama was
so confused.
And you were like, Obama wasn't the president in 2003.
It's like, is this a very accurate guess?
But see, Tony, that okay, fair enough about the old boy one, I guess. But the Bjork one was really on you. I put the album name on the spreadsheet. I put down Post by Bjork, and you decided to listen to the album she made when she was 7 that didn't have Post in the album name.
It came up when I sort of searched for it, Ethan. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you.
I guess I have one last question for you guys before we put an end to the series, which is when we review the music on this podcast, often what you three say is it's hard to review music, or it's like, oh, I don't know, you kind of already put it really well. I don't know what more I can contribute. And you always
said exactly what I was going to say.
And you always say, oh, it's going to be a short podcast because I don't really have much to say. And sometimes that is true. Sometimes you don't have much to say, but sometimes I feel like you have a lot more to say than you thought. And I just wanted to know why you three think it's harder to review music personally than it is to review a film that you've watched, for instance. I'm just curious if any of you have any good answers or any ideas, opinions behind that.
I think it's more broadly that I like understand the process a lot more clearly when it comes to both filmmaking and like traditional narrative structures and things like that, you know, especially game making is literally the fucking job that I am going to do. So I'd like to think I can like do it. But when it comes to music, it's like I can sort of I can get my emotional response and try and analyze it, but it's hard to sort of understand the building blocks that go into it because I know fuck all about music theory. Like I literally don't know what a note is, and every explanation I've ever gotten is bullshit. They tell me C in one octave sounds like C in another octave when they don't. They're different sounds. It's fake. But so yeah. So when it's like I don't know. It's more that it's a lot easier to like deconstruct films and games and writing because I can be like, okay, this shot, this way of framing this character, this theme is used in this way. Whereas it's like, oh, there's some sounds that go like boodoo boodoo, and I'm like, that probably does something. I guess that might be one that happens. That might be an instrument. I guess.
Yeah. I think music theory is much less accessible than I don't know. It's less tangible than even like film theory or game theory.
That's
But
just
hey,
a theory.
But just because like you can tell like oh there's a shot that happened there, some music kicked in that gives you this sort of emotion in that moment, and oh it's calling back this theme, and it's sort of similar with games. When you've got to analyzing music on a technical level is sort of harder because it is. I don't know. I think it's because I'm aware, having done a bit for like GCSE and having played piano a bit, I'm like aware that there is all this technical language out there that I do not know how to wield. But I was very hyper aware of that.
And it's also like the study of like I guess games is like very very new, you know. It's like there is kind of no like authority figure when it comes to sort of games analysis and games theory. It's like you can just sort of come out on the stage and be like, all right, this is this and this is this, and fuck off if you don't like it, you know. Whereas it's like you're going up to game theory and you're looking at like the geniuses who've impacted music over the course of like hundreds of years. Like Mozart, like understood music in like a specific way, you know. Like fucking sheet music has been around forever, right? There's a way you do it. And that's the like that's the way you're meant to do it, right? And like even if you didn't do it that way, you would still understand it through that lens of you know boobada boops and notes.
I guess it feels like the difference between like having to commentate a chess match and having to commentate a football match. Whereas, like, with the football match, even I can sort of tell what's going on, you know. And I do know the offside rule, but I basically don't know the offside rule. Like, I can see there's a team, the way they're passing it, the way they're duping out other players and dribbling it past others. It's like this kind of low ceiling of understanding to get into that. Whereas chess, like, I know the basic rules, like, say with football, but I'm, like, I don't really have the mind for necessarily seeing what someone's doing when they do a move. I think that's probably a good way of thinking about it.
That's really understandable. That is really
I can't
understandable.
believe we did Beethoven on this podcast. Like, what the fuck even did we say in that episode?
Well, it was.
Why
I
did we
actually
do
remember
that?
it being quite a good one because we talked about. Well, I think the thing that I was the most interested in talking about was the fact that the versions of these songs that we listen to for Beethoven aren't actually performed by the artist who wrote them because the artist is dead and there was no way to record music from that era of history. Yeah, would you believe it? Beethoven hasn't been around for a very, very long time. Whereas all the other music that we do is recorded on a CD or a vinyl, or it's on the internet now that you can just stream. So I kind of asked you guys questions about that, what it's like to listen to music that's not performed by its composer. So there were some interesting things. But yeah, it wasn't a very long podcast because I don't think any of us really had much to say apart from, I guess, some interesting stuff. But we did it for the meme, right? It was Tony's fantastic idea to do a podcast on music from 96, but it's 1796 rather than 1996. And that was so funny that we had to do it, right? I mean, there was no other option.
Really trolled the internet. Well, hey, it all comes back. It all comes tumbling down.
I guess that's it, right? That's the end of music, mate. It's been quite a ride. I know I've had a really great time, but it's time to say bye. We're almost at the end of Mediate,
Wait,
right? Pretty
have we
much.
told the origin story of the name Music Mates on the
Oh
podcast?
yeah, okay. This is
Oh,
going to be the final thing that
yeah.
we include.
Yeah,
in
that
this
sounds good.
podcast.
Okay,
Who wants to say
so
it? Tony?
we I it was yeah, I remember doing it, right? It was we were playing a game of, what is it, some form of like charades like game where
Yeah, it
you
was like
write down
Chinese
like the
whispers. Yeah, it was
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
Chinese
You
whispers.
write down the name of a thing and then you pass it along and someone else has to draw it. And I wrote down music notes as like the name of the thing and passed it to Ethan's dad, who saw it and was like it saw my fucked handwriting, and was like, "Ah, but what does this mean?" I thought it said, "Does this say music notes?" I thought it said music mates. And there was this like light bulb moment over my brain and everyone else's brain in the room as we were all like, oh, "That's it. That's what we are now. We're the music mates."
I, I remember it slightly differently.
Because he then drew like a bunch of, well, I think musical notes, but around us four standing. Because he sort of took that to mean, oh, that must be what, like, I don't know, what you call yourself as a group.
Yeah, that's what it
So
was, but he wasn't saying it as in he was asking a genuine, sincere question like he wanted to know more about my life. He took the piss, right?
Yeah,
That's what I remember the best. He took the piss. He
he was
was like,
joshing you.
"Oh, music mates." That's what I remember the name coming from. I remember the scenario and the setting so well. Tony's absolutely
Stood by
right.
your dad.
We were playing Chinese Whispers meets Pictionary, basically. But when that light bulb moment happened, it was my dad mocking us as a group of friends rather than him actually suggesting anything or saying
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
nice.
We are the music mates. Thank you for listening.
That whole podcast. That's what I was gonna say. Ah, you said it all now.